Bold journalism.
But Drew Hernandez is a strong-minded individual.
Exposing lawlessness.
Drew Hernandez, who is ideological.
Finding the truth.
And use the word Antifa.
This is what they do.
Battling
They're
mainstream
liars. The woke mob, all they can do is lie.
These are the front lines.
Welcome to TPUSA Live. Here's what we've got on the live stream today. Today on Frontlines, we are breaking down how police in Florida have exposed Disney employees in a child trafficking sting. Plus, we're bringing in Andy Ngo to talk about some of the recent brutal attacks on Asian Americans. Then we'll send it over to the couch with TPUSA Live. Guest host Isabel Brown talking about a new phenomenon with flight attendants. Plus, an outrageous poll that's a little hard to believe. The Fed is increasing interest rates for the first time in 4 years. Human Events Daily host Jack Posobiec explains what that means for the economy. Then we've got a very special episode of Debate Night. Charlie Kirk faces off with a self-proclaimed anti-fascist to debate whether or not critical race theory should be taught in schools. Plus, coming up on Breakaway, one TPUSA employee and former D1 athlete shares her story of being forced off the team for her conservative values. And as always, the great Alex Clark is rounding out the live stream with politics and a deep dive into why so many women are ditching the birth control pill. But hey, Frontlines is now on Apple Podcasts, by the way, and Spotify and most streaming services. Do not forget to subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. My name is Drew Hernandez, and you are now on the Frontlines. Alrighty, America. You guys have been hearing about this, what the far left is calling the Don't Say Gay bill, right? That's been getting peddled. It's propaganda. They're not actually looking into what the bill actually says. It's not about not saying the word gay. It's about not letting kindergarten teachers sexualize and have secret relationships without the parents knowing. That's what it's about, to protect children. But the far left doesn't want to protect children, do they now? No, absolutely not. But here, the Post-Millennial reports that Disney employees have been busted in a child trafficking sting just days after Disney, the corporation, opposed that very anti-grooming law, which what they call is the Don't Say Gay bill. Yes, I know this is shocking, but is it really? Is it really shocking? The Post-Millennial reports the sheriff of Polk County held a press conference on Wednesday talking about the culmination of a massive sting operation which led to 108 arrests being made, including 4 Disney employees. What a shocker. Wow. This announcement comes after on March 9th, just days ago, after the CEO of Disney loudly and publicly opposed Florida's new anti-grooming law, which according to polls is supported by over 60% of Americans. And we know the far left is saying it's called the Don't Say Gay bill. It's propaganda. These people are pedo simps, and that's what they do. The so-named Operation Sadness 2 was a multi-agency effort centered around Florida's Polk County, which lies just southwest of the Orlando urban area and is a highly populated tourist area. According to local news, people included among the 108 who have been arrested included a retired judge from Illinois, a few restaurant managers, and a man who works at Fun Spot, and several who work at Disney. People arrested were as young as 17 years old and as old as 67. Most of them are now facing charges of soliciting a prostitute, but further charges may be laid in certain cases as the case may be. The sheriff, Grady Judd, during his press conference, particularly highlighted the case of the 27-year-old Xavier Jackson of Florida, who was one of the people caught in the operation and just happens to be a lifeguard at the Polynesian resort for Disney. I quote, the sheriff said, "You think there's a few children around there?" The sheriff continued in his discourse, "That's right, I didn't stutter. He was a lifeguard at the Polynesian resort and was bragging about that. Jackson is accused of sending explicit photos to someone he thought was only 14 years old." Let's run that clip from that press conference.
One of the suspects, 27-year-old Xavier Jackson from Kissimmee, the sheriff says he's accused of sending sexual pictures to what he thought was a 14-year-old girl. Here's more from the sheriff.
Did I mention that he just happens to be a lifeguard at the Polynesian Resort for Disney. You think there's a few children around there? That's right. I didn't stutter. He was a lifeguard at the Polynesian Resort for Disney and was bragging about that.
There's the press conference that took place. The new Florida bill, this is what it actually does, makes it easier for authorities to act against grooming behavior in which children are inappropriately sexualized, including kindergartners. It has been named the Don't Say Gay bill by its far-left opposers, but also enjoys wide support from people on both sides of the political aisle. A little more details on this story. Disney officials have confirmed 3 of the 4 suspects mentioned by the sheriff work for the company. Along with Jackson, the sheriff also said the 24-year-old named Loxon Fidel works at Cosmic Rays Starlight Cafe in Tomorrowland, and 45-year-old Ralph Lessie is employed by the company in their IT department. A Disney representative said all 3 of them have been placed on unpaid leave, and most of the 108 arrests were soliciting a prostitute. This is where we are right now in the United States of America. And I also wanted to point this out too, which is pretty interesting, is the way that Disney has been kind of going back and forth saying they don't support the bill, they do support the bill, they're trying to play both sides. Well, Disney's CEO himself, Disney CEO says company opposes Don't Say Gay bill in Florida and was seeking a meeting with Governor Ron DeSantis. Now, you hear them go back and forth, but here's a quote from the Disney CEO himself. And he said, "I called Governor Ron DeSantis this morning to express our disappointment and concern that if legislation becomes law, it could be used to unfairly target gay, lesbian, non-binary, and transgender kids and families," Bob Chapek said. He also said the governor heard our concerns and agreed to meet with me and LGBTQ plus members of our senior team in Florida to discuss ways to address that. I understand our original approach, no matter how well intended, didn't quite get the job done, he added. We are committed to support the community going forward. This is who these people are. They come out, they say that they support children. This is Disney we're talking about, right? The first point I want to make is very simple. The bill itself is not telling people they can't say the word gay. The bill itself is to protect children from being sexually groomed. And it's hilarious. It's actually sickening when you see blue check famous people on Twitter like Mark Hamill type the word gay multiple times, saying that he supports opposing this bill that is going to oppress gay people and little kids in schools, not even understanding what is inside of the bill, that the bill's actually designed to protect the children from pedophiles in the school system. What kind of teacher, what kind of kindergarten teacher wants the ability to have a secret relationship without the parents knowing about a child's sexual identity? Does anybody feel comfortable with that taking place? I mean, with your kids, your niece, your daughter, someone that you know? It's not about it being gay as well. It's not about lesbianism. It's not about homosexuality. It's not about transgenderism. That's what they make it about. It's about not sexualizing a kindergartner. But this is how morally depraved the United States has become, where not only do they not even know what they're opposing, but they don't even realize it's not about being gay. It's about not sexualizing a child in kindergarten. Why? And not only that, but allowing teachers to have secret relationships with these kids without the parents knowing. Because the state is going to care about your child that wants to come out of the closet because the parents aren't going to accept them. The parents aren't going to accept their homosexuality, their lesbianism, or their transgenderism. No. The parents are bigots. The state, yes, the public school system, the teacher, the kindergartner is going to be the one to sexualize your child. It's not about homosexuality. It's not about transgenderism or lesbianism. It's about children not being sexualized in kindergarten. Now, anyone that lives in a reality that thinks that there aren't pedophiles out there that are just in the school system that want to sexualize a child does not live in reality. This is why we need laws like this to protect our children. It's not even, like I said, it's not even about being gay. It's about not sexualizing a kindergartner. And anyone that can't get behind that just isn't really paying attention or is kind of sus. I'll say that. But I mean, teachers should not have the ability to have a secret relationship with your child at all. That's why the bill was drawn up, because this was taking place in Florida, where these teachers that are virtue signalers, they think that they have the moral high ground, that they have the superiority to have a secret relationship, a secret sexual relationship with your child over the very parent themselves. Like I said, not about being gay, trans, lesbian, no. Listen, I'm straight, and I don't think that a teacher should have the ability to have a secret relationship with my child when it comes to their sexual identity or talking about sex. That shouldn't be. Straight, gay, les, trans, doesn't matter. We should not be sexualizing little kids. But the pedos on the left, they want to. And they don't even realize that they're opposing a bill that protects the sexuality and the innocence of a child from sexual predators. Gay, non-gay, doesn't matter. But they make it about this. And isn't it interesting that Disney opposes this? They try and get on the side of the LGBTQ, the woke agenda. They try and get on this side where, oh, it is gay people. It is little gay kids having their rights being violated. They're not going to be able to have a normal life. So yes, we come out and we oppose it as well. They even donated millions of dollars to some of these organizations as well. And just days later, the authorities in Florida expose a child trafficking ring that includes Disney employees. Now, why is this important to understand? It's important to make this connection because, like I said, it's not about being gay. This is about sexualizing the kids, and you have employees in Disney that are involved in child sex trafficking rings. This is not the first one, by the way. This is just another one that, by coincidence, got exposed days after Disney comes out and opposes a bill that's meant to protect children from being sexualized from pedophiles. And here's Disney being exposed by that very thing. Children being sexualized. Does it all make sense? Have you watched anything from Disney lately? This new woke agenda that wants to sexualize everything from Marvel, Star Wars, everything they own, Pixar, all their animated films. There has to be some kind of woke, sexualized message within these new movies. But people forget. What does Disney target? Children, mostly children. They always have, targeting children, but now they're taking this woke, over-sexualized agenda and they want to further target your children, like I said, whether it's gay, straight, trans, the list goes on. They want to sexualize kids. Why? For what purpose? What did I tell you guys the other day? Remember I told you? What did I say? I said it's going to get to the point where there are going to be pedophiles in public that are going to call for children to be able to have sexualized relationships with them. They're in Disney. They already exist. They just haven't come out publicly yet to protest to be able to make it legal. They are already in existence. Wake up. The time is coming when they will call for the age of consent to not only be lowered, but to be non-existent. Look around you. These people already exist. All righty, America. When we come back, we have the great Andy Ngo with the Post-Millennial. Some viral videos have been continuing to go around the United States, around the world, of these targeted hate crimes on the Asian community. And guess who are predominantly the ones committing them? Is it white supremacists? I'll give you a hint. It's black people. Stay with us.
right, guys, you have signed up, right? You've joined freedomsquare.com. If you haven't, why not? This should have happened a decade ago. How did somebody not think of this earlier? If you're a business owner, we have a business directory to promote your business to patriots across the nation. So if you want to buy American, if you want to sell American, we have a business directory. Whatever it is, go now.
Join us in the fight for freedom. Welcome to Freedom Square.
Welcome back, America. Gas prices aren't the only thing going up in President Biden's economy. Inflation is out of control, and you see that more than ever in the grocery store. The price of meat and seafood has almost doubled. If you're looking to save money without sacrificing quality, then you need to check out Good Ranchers. Their prices on 100% American meat have remained affordable, and their quality beats the store every time. Right now, you can save money, get steakhouse quality, and donate $50 to TPUSA by visiting goodranchers.com/TPUSA. You can do a one-time order or subscribe and have $25 on each box. Remember, when you purchase, you will donate $50 to TPUSA. In the process, you will be helping us to do what we do here at TPUSA and support American ranches. Subscribing to Good Ranchers is extremely convenient and easy to manage. You'll be torn between talking about how great the food is and how much you saved on it. Make your $50 donation today. Go to www.goodranchers.com/TPUSA to get the quality you have been missing. All right, America, breaking news, post-millennial. A man has been arrested after allegedly punching an Asian woman over 125 times and foot stomping her in a vicious, brutal, evil hate crime. This is continuing. Tamel Esco, a 42-year-old man from Yonkers with an extensive and violent criminal record, has been arrested on attempted murder as a hate crime and other charges after being caught on camera beating a 67-year-old Asian last week. Now, before I continue with this story, because they're going to play some B-roll, this is very graphic footage. It's probably going to piss you off, but just giving you guys a warning. Let's continue here. According to police, officers responded to a 911 call around 6:15 p.m. on Friday from a witness who saw Esco punching the woman while on top of her. The victim was found by responding officers badly beaten and bloodied in her building, with the attacker still outside. According to police, the victim passed by Esco, who lives in the same building, on her way home, and he yelled a racial slur at her, which she ignored. After she went to unlock the second door to enter the lobby, the suspect punched her in the head from behind and knocked her to the floor. He then punched her in the head and face over 125 times and foot stomped her 7 times before spitting on her. The victim remains hospitalized but is expected to survive after suffering facial bone fractures, brain bleeding, and multiple contusions and lacerations. According to the witness, whose interference may be the reason the victim is still alive, said, "I started knocking on the door, and when I did, that caught his attention, and that's when he got off of her," said Yvette Crespo. He went out that door, went to the corner, and then put his hands up and roared, she said. This is horrific. Joining me now is the great Andy Ngo with the Post Millennial to get his reaction. Andy, thank you for joining me today, brother. I love you. So sad to see this stuff happening in New York, across the United States of America. What is your immediate reaction to seeing this footage and this horrific story?
I wonder how many more videos we have to see of our elders. And when I say ours, I'm referring to Asian Americans. How many more videos of that do we need to see before interest groups who say that they represent us politically or our civil rights begin actually doing something? And it's not like these groups don't exist. We saw how they and the entire media and left-wing apparatus mobilized together when a year ago there was a deadly mass shooting in the Atlanta area where a young male white suspect allegedly murdered and injured targeted sex workers at Asian massage parlors. The whole narrative immediately with that was that it was spun until as an anti-Asian deadly murdering spree. The evidence for that has not surfaced. Yesterday was the 1-year anniversary of that deadly mass shooting. And if you look at the statements from the suspects in court, he's always maintained, and the evidence that we see so far is that was how he was taking revenge on his own frustrations with his sexual perversions, and it had nothing to do with race. So I bring up that example, that horrible example, just because to show that there is an ability for Asian Americans to mobilize around certain messaging or campaigns. It's not like it's not there. But over and over from coast to coast in America, when we see usually, sadly, our elders and women in Asian American communities being beaten, robbed, killed, usually the suspects are not even charged with hate crimes. So in the case that you opened up with, it was unusual in that law enforcement in New York State did give 2 hate crime enhancements for the attempted murder and assault charges. I commend them for that. That needs to happen more. Too often it doesn't. So all these videos, each one really, it really strikes me personally. And in a way, I think when you see, obviously, anytime you see somebody victimized on camera brutally, it should hurt as a human, right? To see that happening to another human being. When you see it, and then you look at the victims and you recognize, and you see them and it reminds them, let's say, of your mother or your grandmother, who may not speak English very well, may not know how to speak up for their own rights, like, it hurts more. So my anger is not just at the perpetrators who are carrying out these heinous acts, but those who say that they represent us, either in government or through so-called civil rights groups. They get a lot of funding and they fundraise off of it, and they don't really have much to say. They can condemn violence. Condemning violence is easy. Demographics who disproportionately are targeting Asian Americans.
Absolutely, Andy. Even they're the ones that make this about race, right? The far left are the ones that make everything about race. There's a white supremacist around every corner trying to stop a minority. White supremacy is the greatest threat to all minorities in the United States, across the entire world. They make everything about race. Now, when I watch a video like this, whether that was a black lady, a white lady, an Asian lady, a Hispanic lady, that was a human being, right? And you mentioned all of these, support groups on the far left that want to get behind these, communities that they claim are victimized, they claim are targets of racism. Andy, why are they silent when it comes to stuff like this? Especially when we saw all those hashtag campaigns of Stop Asian Hate. They were trying to say that it's white supremacy that's going to come after Asian people. Why does the far left just go total crickets when stuff like this happens?
It's not just the far left, it's the mainstream left as well. Since Trump was elected into office, I think one of the very powerful Democrat Party and liberal media talking points really crystallized around this talking point that white supremacy, neo-Nazism, ascendant fascism is the existential threat to America. And it was used partially to try to delegitimize former President Donald Trump and his voters and supporters. And so Stop Asian Hate as a campaign happened around because of the Atlanta massage parlor shootings. And it was used as a hammer to try to hurt then President Trump, to try to blame him. They blamed him for the times that he used harsh language against the Chinese government and the Chinese state for the coronavirus pandemic, which is fair. So, you know, there are those who are politically cynical who use the suffering of Asian Americans, of Black Americans, and other ethnic minorities for a political purpose. And so when they have no ability to respond, then when they see over and over these viral videos of often other people of color, Black men or Black women, brutally beating, robbing, assaulting Asian Americans because they're unable to process that. So there's a denial, and I think when they can't deny it because of videos like you've been playing, they just choose to ignore it, which is why you're not seeing wall-to-wall coverage on CNN, NBC, ABC, etc. Whereas you know very well if it had been, for example, a 67-year-old Black woman who had been targeted by a white suspect, a big white man with a violent criminal history, this would be a very defining moment for this year. But
it'd be total headline news, Andy. I want to play this last video. You retweeted this the other day from Evelyn Yang. It was Chinatown, New York City, this huge line of elderly Asian women in line to get pepper spray to defend themselves. Let's play that real quick.
Members, and this is the line. It just goes, it goes, and goes.
There's this massive line that you guys are seeing in New York City, Chinatown. Evelyn Yang tweeted, "Look at the long line of mostly Asian women and elderly waiting to get their pepper spray. This is the clearest sign people are living in fear. Hashtag stop Asian hate." This is a problem, whether it's Asian or not. People shouldn't be living like this. They shouldn't be living in fear of their lives. But a lot of these policies that have destroyed these communities, defunding the police, making it harder for police officers to go after perpetrators because everyone's going to be called a racist. This is what happens to society when violence is just allowed to be. Andy, we got about 2.5 minutes left with you, a minute left with you. What are your final thoughts on this video?
When I see that, it makes me actually really sad. I know some people see it as encouraging that, you know, you see mostly women, young women and older women in that line. But I mean, it's a sign of the state losing its ability to protect its citizens. And that is the first, that is the thing that the state has a responsibility to do. You know, one of the defining features of failed states is that the government can't offer any safety and protection for the people who live within its borders. And what we see here is, I mean, it's not even a Band-Aid solution, right? Because pepper spray, I mean, just think that video that you just saw of that woman, when she was sucker punched from the back of the head and knocked down, even if she got out pepper spray from her purse, do you think she really could have done much? You know, so it's I don't, you know, this is one of those times where it's appropriate to use the term systematic. There has to be systematic changes here. This is an issue within the culture, within the politics, and of course within law enforcement as well. And thank goodness we have police departments who do the follow-up investigations and arrests, etc. But within our society, a lot has to change. And I think a lot of journalists need to look within themselves as well.
I totally agree. All the SJWs are silent right now when they should be speaking out. Andy, thank you for joining me. Everyone, go follow the great Andy Ngo of the Post Millennial on Twitter at Mr. Andy Ngo. Thank you for joining me, Andy. Alrighty, guys, this is where we are in America, where the real victims are being literally left without any help. Because the far left wants to claim that they're the defenders of minorities. They want to claim that they're the defenders of the victimized, and they're the SJWs that are going to be there to be a voice for the helpless. Not if it doesn't fit with their political agenda. And this is the disgrace that's happened in this country, where something like this has been politicized when it should not be at all. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, America, my name is Drew Hernandez. These have been the Front Lines, but TPUSA Live starts right now.
Thanks, Drew. Hey, everyone. Once again, welcome to TPUSA in Phoenix, Arizona. We've got some fun green on today for St. Patrick's Day. I'm Isabel Brown, filling in for John Root, who went to go cover a man smashing women's swimming records all the way across the country this week, so stay tuned for that. First, we'll get you all caught up on the latest news regarding Jussie Smollett and Brittany Greiner. Brittany may be going to the gulags while Jussie's getting out of jail. Next, the couch will break down flight attendants who've now turned into the new mask police. Then we're diving into a fresh batch of our Professor Watchlist, teaching students critical hate theory, and then go into a special edition with Jobob and a fancy poll that we'll be finding out about soon. Finally, we have a little St. Patrick's Day treat for all of our viewers in one last thing. Buckle up, TPUSA Live from HQ starts now.
Authentic, unfiltered, grassroots content and conversation every weekday. Live from Phoenix, Arizona at the Turning Point USA headquarters, this is TPUSA Live.
Hey everybody, welcome to TPUSA HQ in Phoenix, Arizona. It's Isabel and the boys again today, but I am hosting for John Root, who is out of town getting some very fun coverage that you guys should be seeing on Breakaway soon. We are joined today by Stephen Davis, aka MAGA Hulk, who looks great in green, by the way. I don't know if I've ever seen you wear green.
I appreciate that.
I love it.
I break it out every so often on special occasions.
Yeah. Producer of the Charlie Kirk Show, Connor Clegg. So excited to have you here with us.
Great to be here.
So happy. And of course, my buddy Jobob, who allegedly has a secret poll to show us later on in the show. I don't really know what that means.
I thought it would be funnier if you could react live.
All right, well, we'll see.
Which would be interesting.
We will see what that looks like. Kicking things off for our daily briefing, I have some shocking news for you. She wasn't able to win enough votes to become governor of Georgia, but now instead, Stacey Abrams has a new job. Check this out.
What?
President of United Earth. Welcome. I am so pleased that you've come. We are eager to begin diplomatic discussions.
Nothing to discuss. United Earth is ready right now to rejoin the Federation.
So it turns out Stacey Abrams is going to be guest starring on Star Trek as not the governor of Georgia, but the president of United Earth. Do you think she's up for the job?
I don't think so. Okay, safe to say. It's funny how she can't make it and she can't cut it when it comes to being governor and being elected governor. So she goes for the next best thing, which is the president of Earth.
Yeah.
Let's go.
I'll tell you one benefit for Stacey is that she is finally a lot lighter in space now. So maybe this was a weight loss thing, right? So that's good. Just a thought.
All right, I like it. Body positivity, right at the end of the day. That's a very positive way to look at things, Connor. What do you think?
This is real. This is a real thing.
This is real.
Holy
so
cow.
she's actually going to be guest starring on Star Trek as president of what they're calling United Earth, which is a very scary sounding thing.
Hashtag globalist.
Yeah.
So, okay, but obviously I think she's actively running for something else in the future.
She's always running for something. I don't know that she's always running.
She's always running.
She might always be walking, but she's always running for something.
Does she think this helps her chances of whatever office that? Because if I were her opponent in any race, this is plastered on every commercial,
100%.
every single segment.
I mean, I don't know. It wouldn't be the first time a television star became president. Maybe she's modeling Vladimir Zelensky's satirical president thing and then eventually becoming president of Earth. Maybe that's what her end goal is here. I don't know.
I don't think there's a lot of Trekkies in Georgia, though. I'm from the South, and I just don't know if that's the consistency you're looking for down there.
More of a Star Wars
You're a wizard,
state,
Harry.
perhaps.
Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. Crazy. Well, in the other world of crazy, our president, who always has some fun things to say, has a very interesting message for us for St. Patrick's Day. Let's check it out.
I may be Irish, but I'm not stupid. I married Dominic Giacoppa's daughter.
I may be Irish, but I'm not stupid. They're from the mouth of our...
Is he saying that Irish people are generally stupid? I don't know.
I mean, I'm Irish. You're
By the
Irish.
way,
Irish.
Clearly, Stephen's Irish.
Obviously. Yeah.
Duh.
Hey, you know what? It's a culture, not a costume, Stephen.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to appropriate.
Yeah. On this day of St. Patrick, the one who ended slavery and invented the light bulb with Rosa Parks, as our school system probably teaches.
Yes, of course.
I wouldn't doubt
it. Probably. I mean, are Are we really surprised though at this point? He says racist everything all the time. This is just like the latest in the litany.
Yeah,
of
and look, maybe I'm a
prayers.
contrarian here. I don't think he was being racist. I think he's just stupid.
Yeah.
And he didn't say that, but he really is. And this was just him bumbling his way through another little press conference. It looks like he wandered in the garden and got some foliage stuck in his pocket too. So maybe Dr. Jill can help him with that.
Maybe, yeah. Dr. Jill to the rescue
Good
every
old
5
Dr. Jill.
seconds in this administration. But you know who she can't save is WNBA star Brittany Greiner. If you guys don't know what's going on right now, 2-time Olympic gold medalist and star of the WNBA, which I'm not sure how much we can call that a star given the excitement there from the American people. But anyway, Brittany Greiner is held in Russia right now for at least 2 more months. They're now saying towards the end of May is when they're considering letting her go for an investigation into drug trafficking allegations now that they've been over there, according to recent reports. Basically, she is facing up to 10 years in Russian prison, which I don't know about you, doesn't sound very fun. We joke about the gulags all the time because of marijuana possession and potentially the intent to distribute that marijuana to Russian citizens. I'm not really sure what the investigation is going to turn out to be, but I don't really think it was a wise decision to bring marijuana into Russia. Just a thought.
Go ahead.
No, I mean, you said it. Why would you do that? I mean, just intelligence, and when it comes to intelligence, obviously there's a lack of. Why ever would you do something as stupid as that, thinking that you're going to get away with it, and then when you get caught, you're going to cry and
I think it's important to note, though, she wasn't originally caught for that. She was detained at the airport originally for having an electric charger in her bag for a vape. So it wasn't even originally like, we suspect you of having drugs on your person or whatever. Now, obviously, it's blown up into this huge thing. But
do you guys remember when... I don't think he's not a WNBA. Leandro Ball, the Ball brothers, got arrested in China. Yeah. Not to make a comparison here, but President Trump ended up getting him and his friends out pretty easily after committing a crime there. Not that this is endorsing people committing crimes in foreign countries, but I wonder if President Biden can pull some strings, or if she's going to be there for a while.
Well, I think this could play into the whole situation with conflict with Russia right now, too. I mean, our president is on record as of yesterday calling Vladimir Putin a war criminal. Connor, do you think they're going to keep detaining her longer and longer as some sort of a political pawn over this conflict?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say 2 things. One is that I don't know that we can really trust anything that's coming out of Russia right now, right? We know that Putin's a thug, and we know that he lies continuously to push his agenda, right? So does Zelensky, but that's another topic. And second, I think that they're going to use her as a political bargaining chip to try and bring the United States, to goad them into maybe doing something a little bit more drastic than Biden probably wants to, right? And so I don't know that we should probably go to war over a WNBA star, probably, but I wouldn't put anything past President Biden. No, I mean, I don't think we should go to war at all. But nevertheless, President Trump was very good at getting Americans out of being detained overseas. ASAP Rocky and the Balls.
I had forgotten about that.
A lot of hostages, some a preacher in Turkey. I mean, he had a hell of a track record.
Yes, he did.
And it just seems like President Biden is asleep at the wheel on getting Americans back. So makes me concerned. He doesn't care about Americans at home or abroad. So
well, and we're making trade deals all the time, releasing people from Guantanamo Bay, which is never covered in mainstream media under this presidency. So I think you're right. I think, unfortunately, she probably is facing a very, very, very long time in Russian prison, which could be interesting. Luckily, not everyone has to stay in prison. Turns out if you actually commit crimes, they don't really care in America today. They just set you free. But if you go to your school board meeting and stand up for your kid, they'll arrest you for domestic terrorism. If you do commit a crime, though, you'll be in luck thanks to the track record now from Juicy Smollett, who's been set free from his prison cell already. 6 days. 6 days for a 150-day sentence. The New York Post said he was only drinking cold ice water as his food and drinks. I'm not sure if that was by choice or based on the situation. There was no Subway catering inside of the prison.
I forget, was he suicidal or was he not suicidal?
He said he's not suicidal.
Oh, he's not? Okay, got it.
Not suicidal.
Okay, cool, I got you. Okay.
I respect you, Judge, but I am not suicidal.
But he was in a cell with his attacker, so you never know really what could be happening. So he was released by a panel of judges yesterday, last last night, I believe, was granted release on bond from the Cook County Jail in Illinois pending an appeal of his conviction now. So they're just going to appeal the whole thing because you didn't want to eat or drink anything in jail, apparently. It came down to a ruling with a 2-1 decision granting his release, and he posted a recognizance bond of $150,000. Doesn't really sound like our justice system is racist. I don't know, just a thought.
If you were him, wouldn't you just want to like serve your time quickly and like get out of here under the wire? Like just appealing this thing. Now, when he loses the appeal, we all get to say, ha again.
Do you think he would lose the appeal though? I don't know.
In this
depends on your judge.
Yeah.
I mean, the evidence is pretty overwhelming that he beat himself up. He literally wrote a check to these Nigerians, and the memo was mugging supplies, right? And so he's not an intelligent person. We saw that every step of the way. But I think that this goes to a deeper point, not necessarily about race, but about political affiliation, right? So let's say that you're a person who is petitioning their government for a redress of grievances, right? Let's say you're doing that in January of 2021, right? You're going to be stuck in solitary confinement without trial, with nothing, with no rights, and you're going to be tortured, and you're going to be put through hell. And there's no chance that you're getting out of there after 6 days, because they're still there after 2 years. But if you align with a certain political viewpoint, if you're a Hillary person, like Tucker said last night, which Jesse is, then you have the privilege of going back to your cushy, comfy home in Chicago, right? So there's a two-tier justice system in America. We've been saying it on the Charlie Kirk Show for a long time, and this is just the latest example. And really, you know, the thing is, it's infuriating. It's not surprising.
No, it's not surprising. That is the world we live in right now, and the justice system is discriminatory. I think that's totally fair to say. The left loves to scream that from the rooftops today, trying to turn it into some institutionalized racism, when in reality, it's a two-tier discriminatory justice system, largely because of your political affiliation in modern-day America. I think we saw this with the Derek Chauvin trial, where you had to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he was responsible for the death of George Floyd. I watched the entirety of that trial. I don't think you could prove that beyond a reasonable doubt. But these jurors were so intimidated, they were so scared of the backlash politically over whatever a verdict could be, that overwhelmingly they knew what decision they had to make. And I think we see that on a judge-by-judge basis as well. So what do we do about it? How can you fix that? Can you?
I'm not coming up with any off the top of my head reasons of how you can fix it immediately. I think sunshine is the best light. Shedding light on something like this is the best way to fix it. But other than that, like, I don't know, if your big union bosses and the police unions, fire department unions, that are all heavily controlled by the left continue to put their politicians in offices of power, it's kind of a tough thing to deal with.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, I think that in this point in time, the American people overwhelmingly see the situation as privilege, right? They see the situation as unfair, and the fact that, you know, Dave Chappelle said it himself, even the black community knew that this dude was clearly lying. So, I mean, we all understand it. We see the privilege, though. There is a lot of privilege. You know, I've never seen a situation like this where you can just be in jail and appeal, and then you get out of jail by posting bond. That doesn't happen. So obviously there's a lot of privilege in this situation, and you can't deny it. And there is a sense that the justice system is kind of broken.
Well, and we're just letting rapists and child molesters and murderers out of prison too because of COVID or concerns about social distancing. I mean, it is absolutely asinine. Connor, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I have a darker take. What's new? But one of the fundamental tenets of the American justice system is the right to a trial by a jury of your peers. Now, whenever we live in a society that we live in today that is so inherently and deeply tribalistic, right? And that's by design. Our leaders did that to us. They broke us into tribes and made us hate one another. I find it really, really hard to believe that anyone in America can ever really get a fair trial, especially when the media plays into it anymore. And so, again, the question is, how do you fix it? I have no clue, because the way that I see it, it's going to take a fundamental rewriting of something that's been a tenet of our republic since our founding, right? Until we can get back to a level of mutual respect for one another as American citizens and look beyond political divides, then I worry that justice in America is really, really threatened.
Well, you can remember the Rittenhouse trial where there's an MSNBC reporter on the streets talking to people, and they're saying, we're going to try and push the jury into a decision. And nobody faced any consequences for that. So until people actually start facing consequences for extremely illegal take. Yeah, you're right. I don't know how much you can do about
or like
it.
Maxine
Unfortunately.
Waters, whenever she was saying that
Exactly.
if they don't get the right decision, we're going to burn it down. I mean, what the hell was Maxine Waters doing in Minnesota in the first place, right?
Great question.
So, yeah, I mean, if we're not going to hold anyone accountable, whether it's a reporter or even a member of Congress for jury intimidation, which I believe is a felony. I'm no lawyer like Isabel, but I think I know that it's wrong. And if we're not going to hold people accountable for that, again, not surprising, but really, really troubling.
Well, my hope is that people smarter than us debate this for a very long time, because I think you're right. We don't know how to fix it overnight. It's going to take some time. But my hope is that a centralized tenet of our country through our Constitution is reinstated, that you are entitled to the presumption of innocence until you're proven guilty. You do have a fair trial of your peers, and that we don't just let criminals out on the street because it happens to be politically convenient.
Right.
Speaking of debates, Charlie Kirk is hosting a lot of very fun debates right here at TPUSA HQ with his program Debate Night. We've got a fun little sneak peek into what you guys can expect from the next episode now.
Charlie, what if I was to tell you, though, you're such a smart guy, that none of that is correct?
That's such
then
a
it would
flawed,
be
you
there
know
by
that's a
now.
flawed argument.
No, not at all. I think race doesn't matter to white people because we are in a majority white system.
You think we're embracing authoritarianism?
Yes, very much so.
Have you heard of Justin Trudeau?
The concept of structural racism?
Yeah, it's a myth. You can't be serious.
I'm
You're
very
You're
serious.
so much smarter than that.
Plain police.
Welcome back to TPUSA Live. We are joined today by Stephen Davis, Connor Clegg, Jobob, and myself, Isabel Brown. Do you guys remember those things that we used to wear on our face that like none of us have worn in a really long time, especially in airports, called masks? Well, it turns out even leftists are tired of wearing masks because the United States Senate passed a bill introduced by Senator Rand Paul on Tuesday, voted 57-40 to overturn the federal requirement that passengers on U.S. airplanes and other modes of public transportation wear masks. That's a much bigger vote margin than I was expecting. 57-40. Go for it.
They're up for re-election, you know. And
Yeah.
At that point in time, they know that it's a deeply unpopular thing that they've been pushing, the left has been pushing when it comes to this. American people are not for it. They can't stand it, and they're reaping the whirlwind. So you better believe that these people are going to try to jump on board and say, "Yeah, we don't want this mask mandate for you. We never wanted this for you." That was the other people.
Well, I think that's the difference between elected officials, elected public servants, and government bureaucrats. This vote came less than a week after the executive branch, through TSA, announced they would be extending the mandate from March 18th to April 18th. That's the third extension of the mandate since it was imposed again in January 2021. Wild. We are over it. I look at that picture and I just feel for all these people sitting on planes. We sit on a lot of planes doing what we do, and every single time I just literally hate my life. I get a water bottle and I open it and I have my little pretzels and I very slowly chew.
I actively
the entire
identify
time.
as eating or drinking.
Exactly. Exactly.
So you know what I think is hilarious? I happen to have, because I got to go on a flight today. I happen to have my mask that is a mesh mask.
Yes, sir.
This is a mesh mask. So when people ask me to put it on, because they are like, "Oh, you have to put it on," I say, make it very obvious and very clear. Yes, I will put on my mesh mask that will not stop anything for your appeasement, and make it sarcastic. And thankfully, I haven't been thrown off a plane yet. If I didn't have to get places all the time, I probably would have put up more of a stink. But unfortunately, I got to get to where I'm going.
Got to get to work.
I think we
There's
all
no
have
other way to do
more
that.
sly ways of getting around it than the screaming and kicking. But with the midst of people pushing back and really standing for their individual rights, we've seen flight attendants dramatically transform from being a servant of the customer on the plane, serving you drinks and food or whatever else you might need, taking care of your safety, to now being the mask police. I don't know how many flights I've been on where a flight attendant has just screamed at people in the line as you're scanning your boarding pass, as you're getting on the plane, over the PA system. The other day I was on a flight where the pilot came over the intercom and said, "Hi, I'm your pilot. This is where we're going. This is how long it's going to take. I know we're all sick and tired of it, you guys, but this is the way it is right now. And just put on your mask, keep it on." Not 2 seconds later, a flight attendant comes over. "The TSA has federally required that you wear a mask unless actively eating or drinking."
But that's the fascinating part about it, is the way different people approach it. Because I've had flight attendants come up to me and say, "Look, this is my job. I don't want to get fired." And I'm like, all right, I understand this is not your decision, and I get it. But then there's other flight attendants that, sir, you need to put your mask on. I say, all right, Napoleon, sure, I'll don this face diaper because you think you have some sort of power. Right. And then I call them an air waitress, and they get very upset.
Well, I'm curious what your guys' experiences have been. Jobob, we just heard something from you, but what are you finding from all of these flight attendants? Are they mask police 2.0 in the footsteps of Dr. Fauci, which, by the way, where the hell
I just saw an unsolved documentary on Fauci.
I see that.
He's
By
been
some
missing.
guy.
Yeah.
He's pretty
There's
handsome.
one guy, you're kind of like you.
Anyway, what are you guys experiencing on planes?
Look, these flight attendants, God love them, I think that they have never felt... How do I say that? I'm trying to say this nicely. I gave up being an asshole nicely. So these flight attendants, generally speaking, lead a pretty miserable, pathetic life. They think it's going to be fun to jet around, then you realize that you have no permanence, right? And so they get off on this idea of being this micro-tyrant. We saw with COVID the rise of the micro-tyrant.
Micro-tyrant.
These people who are empowered by the government, but they're not deputized. They don't work for the government. They work for you, frankly. And they get off on the power because they've never felt anything like that in their life.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, at the end of the day, the reality is you just kind of got to say, who the hell are you?
Right.
You know, and that's what, here's the thing. You can kick, you can scream, you can be sly about it, you can be sneaky. What I've done, and we started the Charlie Kirk Show mask challenge around, what was it, SAS in Tampa a while back? And when I was going through the Tampa airport on the way back from SAS, there were people shouting, hey, Charlie Kirk mask challenge, because they saw someone without a mask on, right? And that was really cool. And the way that you do it, I think, is confidence inspires confidence.
Amen. Yeah.
And so you just got to just walk through it. You know, put your chest out, stand tall, walk through it. And if someone says, put it on, you say, what? You know, and walk by them.
That's what I do.
Yeah.
I walk through airports breathing free every single time.
Yes.
I'll put it on for 2 seconds to go through TSA, which I've pre-checked, so I literally just walk through. I take it off.
Oh, I don't even put it on for TSA.
Wow,
Oh, no kidding?
they yell at me. They yell at me all the
Do
time
they
if I
really?
don't. Yeah, they have. But I make
That's
it
the
through
patriarchy
TSA.
for you.
Yeah, of course, naturally. It's all that anti-feminism that we see in society. And I walk through and I smile. That is my #1 strategy through airports. I look people in the eye and I smile at them. And they go, huh. Everybody that gives me the scowl when I'm not wearing a mask, they pause for a second. They sometimes even stop walking for a second, and they go,
maybe I'm the asshole.
yeah.
Right?
And so I'll see people who wear it right below their nose. They'll take it off after they see me smiling, not wearing it. They're like, I don't have to do this. Like, I don't have to give in to this absolute nonsense.
The people that are so ready to be confrontational are expecting confrontation back.
Exactly.
So when they say, sir, please put your mask on, I say, no, thank you, and just walk away. And they're like stunned, like, wait, I was expecting him to yell at me, and he's not.
Did you just defy my orders?
And then, but then they have to follow me, and they're not going to do that. And then you're like, oh,
Make a big
man, it
stink
just
about it.
belittles them. It's so much fun.
I had one very old woman. She was very sweet, actually. I did. This is the only time I felt bad. She was a TSA agent who checks your passport and ID and stuff. She followed me to the scanner. It's like, sir, you told me you were going to put your mask on once you got in line.
Oh, no.
And I was like,
oh, no.
It's in the conveyor belt. I'm sorry. I love you. I don't know, but I'm still not putting my mask on.
Still not doing it, though.
Here's my favorite line to use in airports. If people come up to you, or the grocery store, or wherever, if somebody's upset that you're not wearing a mask, very calmly, smile, whatever, just say, no, I can't. I have CS. And it sounds like this horrible disease. Like, you obviously can't breathe through a mask if you have CS. Well, we don't have to tell them CS stands for common sense. Right? So, at the end of the day, if you need a cop-out, you can just tell them
That's good.
Everybody always goes, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I didn't know. And
CS, oh my
I'm
goodness.
suffering from a debilitating case of CS.
But I think what this is going to have to come down to is individual companies saying, yeah, we're tired of this BS. We're not going to do this anymore. I don't care if
makes
it's
so much money.
illegal or an anti-mandate. And I've said this from the beginning. Could you imagine, from either a business or a consumer standpoint, let's start with consumer, if every single passenger on American Airlines tomorrow, not even all of them, just one, decided, you know what, we're not going to wear our masks today. What is American going to do? Cancel every single flight across the entire country? They would be bankrupt in a day. They can't do that. Vice versa, could you imagine if the CEOs of American, Southwest, Frontier, I mean, several different airlines came together and said, yeah, we're not going to do it anymore. What's TSA going to do? Nothing. What is the government going to do when all of a sudden the entire economy comes to a screeching halt because you can't get goods places where they need to go? People can't travel to accomplish their job. Congressmen and women can't go back to Washington, D.C. to actually pass laws that would solve all of these crises. I mean, it would happen overnight. Yeah, right? It might be great to force them to spend some time in their district, but I think this is really what it's going to come down to. And now we've started to see British Airways, and I believe it was Virgin Atlantic, have now come forward and said, yeah, we're not going to do this anymore. obviously, they have a caveat there with a little asterisk that says, well, unless it's still legally required in your country. So if you fly on a British Airways plane from the U.S. to London now, I guess maybe once you get into international waters,
Yeah,
they
wait,
tell
how does
you.
that work?
I don't know how that works, but what do you guys think
duty-free
about that?
terminals, right? What does that mean? Is federal law
I don't know.
mandated in duty-free terminals?
That's a great question.
That's a really good question, actually.
I have no idea the answer to that question. What do you guys think about these companies? Who do you think is going to be the first one to cave?
I mean, look, here's the thing. I watch the way that conservatives recently have decided to start rallying around the good guys, right? You've seen these examples, like MyPillow, right? MyPillow is a great sponsor of the Charlie Kirk Show, and Mike Lindell was persecuted by the left, and conservatives have really made it a cause to support that guy. I think that if an airline was smart and they actually want to look out for the bottom line, they would say, hey, we're not going to do the thing. Maybe we're breaking the law, but we're not going to do it. Come fly with us. They would see a 197% surge in business overnight.
Yep, agreed.
And that would be like conservative air, right?
I don't even think it's a conservative thing.
Yeah,
like,
no, it's not.
We just saw in the
At this point,
Senate,
it's
everybody's like, this is stupid.
It's not Mitt Romney.
No.
Definitely not
Are we
Mitt Romney.
shocked
He
by
voted
that?
against it.
Of course.
He did,
Of course.
because that's who he is. But I even saw this girl who won American Idol that I follow on Instagram several years ago. She's hugely leftist. She did an Instagram story in the airport the other day, like, I know that we're all supposed to be doing our part, but this is effing stupid. Like, we don't have to wear this anywhere else other than on the plane. And in many cases with these international flights, you have to prove your COVID status by taking a test even before you get on the plane anyway. So everybody's like, this is the dumbest thing ever. Why can't we get rid of this? I don't even think it would be a conservative standpoint.
You're right.
I think if one of these airlines was just like, we're done, Delta or Southwest or American,
everyone would fly.
Everyone would quit their other flights and go buy tickets to go on there.
I would not fly on Delta if they were the first ones to do it.
Really? You don't like Delta?
That was mean. I probably should have, I don't know. Yeah.
I hear usually positive things
This show
about
brought to you by
Delta.
American Air.
All right, other predictions. Do we think that now that it's passed through the Senate, it's going to pass through the House?
I don't know.
Will Nancy bring it to the floor is the
That's
problem.
the real question. You can
probably-
force a vote, but it would be hard to
Yeah.
gather the support for that.
I would say that she probably, there's a lot of very purplish leaning districts that she probably doesn't want to get those people on the record saying one thing or another, especially leading up to midterms.
Absolutely.
I would imagine that, well, I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't get to the floor.
Me neither.
I mean, but here's the thing. You saw it passed by a fairly wide margin in the Senate, which was super surprising. Pelosi has it's either 3 or 6 seat majority right now, which is barely a majority.
It's dinky, yeah.
Yeah, there's a chance that it could get there because I know that the left is very concerned. The leftists in Congress are very concerned about the re-election possibilities, especially with the president screwing everything up the way that he is. She might bring it to the floor because they're going to force her to do it, right? It's going to be a question of whether or not the squad still has power over Pelosi, or if the vast majority of Congress, who represents the vast majority of America, which is normal and they want to breathe freely, that's the question, is who actually has control over Nancy Pelosi.
I think they see the polling. I think they see the polling.
And that's what I think. I think that just what you said, that when it comes to, they know that these mask mandates are widely unpopular, so they have to play ball at this point. They have to. If they want re-election, they have to play ball. And at the end of the day, their back's against the wall, so they're going to do it.
Crazy. All right. Well, I know that the science doesn't really support this anymore. As a scientist, I can tell you it's a load of crap. So stop listening to this idea of follow the science. But what is scientifically true is that the best meat on earth comes from our friends at Good Ranchers. Check out this ad from them right now.
Good Ranchers, straight from the American farm. 100% American meat, 100% of the time. Delivered straight to your door.
Wait, are those my Good Rancher steaks? I'll be taking these.
Claim your 10 free bistro fillets with your next order with promo code TPUSA Live at goodranchers.com.
We are back with TPUSA Live. I'm Isabel Brown filling in for John today. We've got Jobob, Connor, Steven. We are having all of the fun conversations today. Gosh, you know, I just hope that while he's over there in Georgia watching the swimming championship, John slaps the narrative of men becoming women as hard as he slaps that steak every
Just
time
don't
we
slap
watch
Leah
that.
Thomas's meat.
Yeah, that probably isn't a smart
'Cause it's
direction to go in. It is there, according
'Cause he's
to
a man.
their teammates. Boom. All right, cool. We are jumping into our newest addition to the Professor Watchlist. If you're unfamiliar with our Professor Watchlist program, our team here at TPUSA does a fantastic job finding the absolute craziest, most asinine people teaching the next generation of adults on college campuses. Today, and forgive me if I totally butcher this person's name, is Dr. Ikao Yanka, who is a professor of law in the Cardozo Law School at Yeshiva University in New York City. This professor specializes in criminal law, criminal procedure, election law, and torts. And he most recently served as a member of the New York Democratic Lawyers Council, the voting rights arm of the New York Democratic Party, and the coordinating arm of the DNC. He recently wrote an article, this is fun, entitled, "Can My Children Be Friends with White People?"
Oh, yes, boy. Next question.
And in the piece, this professor encourages his kids to shun any close friendships with white people, people who happen to be a different race. This was published originally in 2017. He wrote that friendship across racial lines asks black people to ignore their own safety, and that you cannot ignore someone who voted for President Trump because you can't trust white people. So now he's declared friendships between black Americans and white Americans as, in his words, impossible due to racial privilege of white people, in his opinion, or what he describes as due to conditions of dominance. And he further wrote that history has provided little reason for people of color to trust white people.
I remember this part of Martin Luther King's speech. I remember that, you know, where he said, "I want my little black girls and you know, little white girls to be able to play together." Oh, I guess he's going against what she was saying. Lord, isn't that crazy? That is insane that you're honestly, what is this, specializes in criminal law. You want someone like that specializing in criminal law. No.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Talk
Like,
about the justice system and all the problems there. Yeah, he's teaching the next generation of lawyers. Think about that.
And judges,
Yep.
and you know, whatever. But here's what's really interesting to me, to that point, is that Martin Luther King gave that speech at a time where white people were lynching black people, you know, burning their buses, kicking them out of lunch counters. The whites at the time when Martin Luther King gave that speech were very vicious in some instances. But he still said, "I want to get to the point because I believe in the common humanity of man,
Boom.
to where I can trust them and we can come together." If Martin Luther King can trust these people, then you can trust someone who voted for President Trump. I promise you.
Do you guys feel like we actually ever did that? Because I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I think about like the blip of history where most of us were born in the 90s and the early 2000s, and I feel like these issues just weren't really a problem. Like they didn't exist at that point in time. And I talked to my parents about what it was like when they were our age, and they said, yeah, this wasn't really an issue. Like nobody ever talked about this. You certainly didn't look at people with hatred in your heart who happened to look different from you. You never even talked about who you voted for with any of your friends or any of your family members. Do you think that actually happened, or do you think this was like always underneath the surface from the time where Martin Luther King gave that speech to now?
No, it wasn't.
No, not at all. I don't believe that.
Well, so my mom is Irish, so happy St. Patrick's Day. But my dad's Samoan, and technically they're an interracial marriage. I technically am in an interracial marriage. I would have had no idea. Like that's not even a thought that would have occurred to me until people started pointing it out, because apparently it's important for some reason. Or it's not important. You need to stay segregated according to this law professor. But that's, I mean, when you're talking about like, was this a thing when we were born? Like,
no.
I don't remember at all even like that wasn't even like a thought. And it was only, I didn't, again, my wife is Italian, right? She joked about us being in an interracial marriage the other week, and I was like, I guess we are. I guess I didn't even, like, that's not even a thing that I thought about.
Stephen, you and I have talked about this a ton because I've been sharing with you the makeup of my extended family. I am like the only group of individual immediate family that looks like this in my family. We are all different races, all different ethnicities, all gender identities. Like literally we look like a random sampling poll. You can't make a more distinctly different group of people, I swear. And it was the same thing. I was never raised to think that my cousins who were black or Asian or Samoan were different from me in some way. They were just my family. Like I didn't even look at them a different way whatsoever. Now, the fact that I just said that to many would be considered racist. And I know in your dating relationship too, you guys are in an interracial couple.
The amount of flack that me and my lady receive on a consistent basis due to the color of our skin is it's unbelievable.
From who,
from both. From
really?
Mostly from black. Mostly from black. Yeah. You sometimes get it from white.
Sad.
But it is. It's unbelievable. It's like I thought we're supposed to base things again, going to Martin Luther King Jr. again. Content and character as opposed to color of skin. That's the whole basis of things. That's the way you're supposed to live your life, basing things on the content of someone's character. If someone's a terrible person, then that's one thing. But the color of their skin is neither here nor there. They can't do anything about that. You were born like this. So it's the very fact that they're promoting this type of idea or ideology. It's scary. It's scary that this is where we're going to in 2022.
Well,
we're going backwards.
This professor, I will say, is an idiot, but he's at least got some balls because he went himself on Tucker Carlson to defend his remarks. We have some video to show you guys.
This is fantastic.
I don't understand when it became okay to generalize about racial groups.
Well, I mean, it's to me, a strange way to put the question. I mean, while it's the case that we all hope that we can be judged for who we are, I think while some people have the luxury to be raised only being told to look at individual people, it should be no surprise to you that black people, in particular black men, have been taught forever that they have to be careful how they behave around white people, that the way they behave will be interpreted differently, that when they misbehave, it'll be punished differently, that if they laugh too loud, if they walk into a nice store,
You're a black American, you two are going right to jail right away, according to that law professor, so that's fine. But it doesn't stop with him. We have another addition, Dr. Rhonda Gerard, who's an associate professor in the English department at Fresno State. Gotta love California. Oh, she just looks like a ball of fun. I would love to take her class. So on her personal Twitter account, she has castigated white people, praised terrorists, and has openly called for the destruction of Israel. One tweet calls to free Palestine from Israel by stating, "From the river to the sea." The phrase "from the river to the sea" was originally popularized by terrorist groups like the Palestinian Liberation Organization and alludes to the destruction of Israel and genocide of the Jewish people who live in Israel between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. This professor grew up in Egypt and Kuwait and has said that she used to attend after-school programs led by the Palestinian Liberation Organization, a terrorist group, to learn what she calls resistance songs. She then has gone on to berate white people all over her Twitter account as privileged and police members of a white militia. We have one tweet here to share with you guys that says, "No lie, I am livid to see white authors, including women, get huge advances and second and third chances with the press when their books don't change lives the way mine have. I don't give a F if that's conceited. As Remy Ma says, I'm conceited, I got a reason." Here's another one. Reminder, the police are the largest white militia in this country. We must abolish the police. This is not the worst president we've ever had. Some presidents were enslavers, and some killed 1.5 million Iraqis. Stay focused, a cob, which means all cops are bastards. We could go on and on. There's like 8,000 tweets from this professor.
The middle paragraph seemed out of context.
It's all out of context.
Like,
What
cops
exactly-
sucks, but also Trump's not that bad.
I guess. Honestly, I don't know how this has anything to do with English. Like,
it doesn't.
Obviously, these conversations aren't just happening on her Twitter account. They're happening in her classroom, clearly, because that's what we're seeing across the board with all of these professors. I'm never shocked and amazed anymore. I was when I was in college, like the first time this happened, but then slowly, legitimately, every single one of my professors would spew crap like this in like anatomy class. So obviously it has nothing to do with ethnic studies or gender studies or poli-sci. This is happening in every single department, especially the humanities with English.
Can I tell you something? We talked about this briefly last time I was on, but when I was at school in 2017, I was the student body president of my school, right? And the newspaper there, which was propped up by the Department of Journalism, right, and all these professors, they published this piece that said whiteness should be abolished, and they were calling basically for the genocide of white people. And so I said, you can't do that. And this was before CRT was ever a thing, right? And so I saw kind of this smatterings of this start to pop up like 4 or 5 years ago, and I thought that was wild.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, I would be surprised if that weren't what's being published.
Right.
That's what's not being taught in classrooms.
Yeah, we were on campus at the same time, different schools, but I think our experience in student government and everything we went through individually was the precursor to all of this stuff. And seeing President Trump elected really emboldened a lot of these professors to say the quiet part out loud, and they are openly calling for a lot of this absolutely insane stuff.
Which is weird because it's so interesting, actually. If President Trump was the fascist that they said he was, you'd think that they would be a little bit more scared to say the quiet part out loud, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like they were freer to speak their minds, no matter how stupid they were under President Trump. I don't know.
Well, would you guys go back to college at this point in time? I don't know that I would.
See, I went to college, what was it?
In the late 80s.
Thanks a lot, Jobob.
Mean.
Boomer here, boomer. But I think it was 2003 is when I went to college, and I didn't see any of this.
Yeah.
So every time I keep hearing this stuff crop up and creep into academia, I'm like, what in the world is happening nowadays? I didn't experience none of this. What is happening?
Yeah.
Goodness. So heck no, I wouldn't go.
Do you guys remember the grievance study affairs? It was James Lindsay, Helen Pluckrose, Peter Boghossian. They submitted a bunch of fake papers to university systems to get published.
That's amazing.
Because they were so woke that they got published.
Yes.
I think it would be hilarious if Turning Point USA decided to sponsor an individual who would say the most ridiculous things in hopes of getting hired as a professor, and see how, like, Stephen Davis, and all he says is, like, just have one tweet on your Twitter feed, white people are evil, and see how many places you could get hired. Just to see what happens.
Amazing.
That would be great.
Well, I'll tell you guys, right now I'm going through the thought of whether I go back. I have a seat in law school if I want in the fall, and I will tell you what, every day pushes me farther away from going back to college campuses. What's happening on campus and in academia at all levels, starting in kindergarten, is just mass brainwashing. This is no longer, oh my gosh, Mom, could you believe what my professor said in class today? This is like, at some point, you kind of have to bend the knee and somewhat agree with these professors in order to even graduate and make it into the workforce. It's, well, I'm just saying, like, at some point, this is what you do. You either decide, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to give in to what my professor is saying, and then you get failing grades, which I did in college. Or you say, okay, I'm just going to fake it enough that I'm going to make it through. But at some point, psychologically, that does take a toll on you. And whether intentionally or not, sometimes that ends up changing your entire position on subjects. I saw that with dozens of my friends throughout college who just said, hey, I'll just pretend. I'll just get through the class. I'll just get through the student government race or whatever. So it's really, really crazy. But I'm so glad that we are fighting that indoctrination here at Turning Point USA. We're doing everything we can. One of the best ways we do that is through our events. And my favorite event of the year is coming up. Sorry, boys. No meat allowed, unlike the swimming championships with Leah Thomas. YWLS in June, which is my favorite. Check out this ad.
Did you just make a dick joke?
Yes, of course.
Did you
It's
just
Isabel
assume,
and the boys.
Did you just assume Connor's gender?
Yeah, of course I did, obviously. Well, we have YWLS coming up. We are so excited about it, and I know that there's a lot of excitement with our students who are facing all of this stuff on campus and in high school right now to just get away from that for a few days.
Amen. Are we still on Professor Watchlist?
No, we're moving on unless you have something very important to say.
I do. I mean, I always do.
Share it. And then Jobob is going to blow our minds.
I woke up today, so I have something important.
We're going to get to your poll in just a second, but I just want to close the loop here. We talk about indoctrination. The left is really good at indoctrination. Indoctrination is not necessarily a dirty word, folks, right? The right needs to get better at doing it, right? We need to be better and more willing and confident and bold to go in there and say, yeah, I am going to indoctrinate your students with the values that are good and true and right and permanent, the laws of nature and nature's God. Send conservatives into the classrooms if they'll let them go there. And yeah, indoctrinate the students. Like brainwash them into believing that America is good and it's good to be a good person and it's moral to actually love your fellow American.
Well, I don't think they will let them in there. I think the way you do that is homeschooling your kids and maybe not brainwashing them, but exposing them to the reality. When I was growing up, my parents never believed in a kids' table, ever. No. And they never believed in having kids' conversations with their kids. My parents are both Catholic attorneys, so they're very opinionated people. But we were forced to watch every State of the Union, every presidential debate. We were forced to sit at the dinner table and have them explain, hey, this is what liberals believe in this country. This is what conservatives believe in this country. Here's what your dad and I think, and this is why it's right and why that's wrong. But go do all the research, educate yourself on the issue. Don't just listen to one side of the story, and really expose yourself to what you know is good and true and beautiful, and then make an informed decision from there. The problem is that's not happening in education. So I'm very inspired to see families all across the country in record numbers start to homeschool their kids. I definitely will be doing that. All right, Jobob.
Okay, finally, since you three have stopped jabbering for a second.
Okay, Dad.
This, I think, so check this out. I don't think I'm underselling this here. I saw a poll this morning put out by YouGov. Now, YouGov is maybe they have some political leanings, but they also are pretty clearly a serious polling organization. It's not like, I don't want to disparage Breitbart, but when Breitbart News does their own poll, like, who knows? But YouGov is a serious polling organization.
Yep.
When I say that this is super important, I say that because it's a great picture into what the American people actually think and believe, and it also begs the question, how do we then fix this? Did you have a question?
No, I'm on the edge of my seat.
Yeah, as you should be.
I don't know what this issue is going to be.
No, it's not a single issue. It's just what Americans think about a broad spectrum of things, and then correlated with what actually exists. So, Senator Bernie Sanders and Senator Elizabeth Warren constantly go around talking about the millionaires and the billionaires. They need to pay their fair share in taxes.
Pretty good impersonation.
Thank you. I worked on it several hours in the mirror this morning. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, in the comment section, I'm curious to see what you think is the actual answer here before I share the real one. But YouGov did a poll that asked, and there's a bunch of questions here, how many people in the United States, how many households do you think earn over $1 million a year? Just curious, what do you actually think?
How many households?
How many households do you think earn $1 million a year? Keep in mind, all of the media saying the millionaires and the billionaires need to pay their fair share.
Less than 5%.
Okay, that's good. What do you think?
Sheesh, I was going to say about...
Just throw a number out there.
15.
Okay. Interesting. So the actual number, what Americans think is 20% of American households make over $1 million a year. That's what
1 in 5?
Americans
They
think.
really think that?
But think about how the media is pushing this constantly, that the millionaires and billionaires are going to bail us all out. In actuality, if you round down, the answer is 0%. 0% of American households make over $1 million a year. Now, obviously, it's like 0.01%.
Interesting.
But if you round down, it's $1 million.
So it's less than 0.5%.
It's less than 0.5%.
Wow.
Trans people. The American people, when polled by YouGov, a serious polling organization, Americans said that they think about 21% of people are transgender.
No way.
That does
Wait
not.
a minute.
No, if they were polling Gen Z, that does not surprise me whatsoever.
This is what
because
I'm
they're
saying.
probably categorizing in non-binary, and even if you're questioning your gender or whatever, I mean, I would not be surprised
Connor,
if people our age said
why are people thinking like this? Because I'll give you what the real answer is. Why? Where's this coming from?
Well, I mean, I think it's coming from media and culture and all the way from the White House. It's being normalized and it's sick and disgusting. And we
Woman
have
of
to
the
disavow it
year,
every turn.
baby.
Yeah.
Any thoughts? The woman of the year is a man.
I mean, I agree. I mean, it's being perpetuated everywhere you look. Netflix and Disney Plus. You look at any type of streaming. So it's unbelievable.
Yeah,
it's disgusting. So yeah, absolutely.
Americans think 21% of people in this country are transgender. The answer is less than 1%. That is how diverged the American people are from what's actually going on. How many people do you think are Muslim in the United States of America? The American people said 26%. In actuality, it is 1%.
Yeah.
How many people are Native American? The American people said 27% because minorities are getting front row center on everything going on all the time. It is actually about 1%. This is going to be funny. I'm curious to see all of you meat lovers here. How many people do you think are vegans in this country?
Oh, I would say probably
5% maybe.
5%. 5% is the actual answer. The American people think.
Wow.
Master's degree people. The real one that I earned, not was fed to me by a horrible professor.
The American people think 30% of people in this country are vegans.
A third, almost a third.
Almost a third of people don't eat any meat and no meat products. Then you get into races. How many people do you think the American people as a whole, what percentage do you think the population is black? The American people said 41%.
gotta be kidding me.
13. Everybody knows that.
It's 12 or 13. That's what the poll estimated is actually true. So Steve, where does this come from? That's what I'm curious about. Like
the media.
Okay, but why? What are they pushing? What is the incentive here of making people think this is not even regarding the bad things that happen to black people all the time. This is just overstating entirely statistics. We're not even talking about values here.
Right.
Like, where does that come from?
Because they hate reality.
100%.
I say this all the time. This isn't about politics anymore. Like, we have to, everybody in this country has to move beyond the idea that all these conversations we have on a daily basis are about right versus left and conservative versus liberal or whoever's running for president of the United States. Gen Z and the people who are coming into adulthood right now, people born around the turn of the millennium there, so like late 90s and early 2000s, their concept of reality is like the upside down in Stranger Things. Like, it is so fundamentally opposite of what our parents experienced when they were our age that it's hard for me when I go give speeches to older groups or I do news hits with older people and they always tell me like, oh, it can't be that bad. Yes, it is that bad. Like, we don't even know if our genitalia corresponds to our identity, and because that has been so warped. So this doesn't surprise me.
That's why I think this is so important, because you can argue about policy all day long, but people vote based on what they believe, and if what they believe is so astronomically wrong, not necessarily even from a policy standpoint, like I think this works, no, I think this works. No, we're just wrong. We're calling this a camel. This table here is a camel. Now vote, and your vote counts just as much as my vote. Which is ridiculous.
All right, what else?
One more that I think
more?
is kind of interesting here.
Good stuff.
How many people? So the American people think there are about half of us are Christians.
Okay.
Just as a religious overall. In reality, it's 7%. That's again.
7?
Sorry. 70.
Oh.
70. 70%.
We got a big problem here, folks. Stop the show. Oh my gosh.
We got a big
70% problem.
It's time for a new crusade if that's
But there's so much crashing down on religious culture and Christians in particular that the American people think there's no way there's more than half of us that are Christians. In reality, there's 70%
we're a
of us.
Christian nation. Yeah, it's starting to make sense how Joe Biden got 81 million votes. We're all just really stupid. Turns out.
Makes sense to me.
God help us, dude.
This is not in the poll, but I thought it would be interesting if they asked, how many straight white couples do you think exist in the United States? And they'd probably say about 9% of people are straight.
You think so?
I don't know. What do you that's what I'm saying.
What do people think?
What do people think?
Oh, okay.
We would be extinct. It's true.
Connor and I would not be sitting here if that was the case.
We're not a couple.
They don't exist in TV commercials anymore. If you've watched TV ever, I don't know who watches TV nowadays, but if you do watch TV, they don't exist there.
Or Hallmark movies these days. I'll tell you what, my mother is obsessed, and my sister, with Hallmark Christmas movies. They start on Halloween, and they will watch Hallmark Christmas movies every single night from Halloween all the way through till after Christmas, to like New Year's. And now even Hallmark movies, which is like a Christian channel, like always professing Judeo-Christian values, they have gay couples in Hallmark movies and all kinds of stuff. So they're trying to make that percentage look different.
The thing I love about Hallmark movies is the plot is totally unpredictable.
It is always the exact same movie. People have made entire TikTok accounts over like pitching the new Hallmark movies, and they're great.
Are Hallmark movies unpredictable, or are they all the same?
It's the new two pineapples belong on pizza.
That's basically that. There's a lot more of those, like there's those polls going down, and it's just so crazy how drastically different from reality, unfortunately, the majority of America is. So I'm hoping I didn't oversell that, but I think that's massively important in terms of what American people actually think, and also kind of gives, I think, me and maybe us a better idea of how we should be catering messages and how important getting these messages out to these people are.
Yeah, and can I tell you, it has real policy implications. I saw a statistic this morning, actually. It was a poll or whatever. It was data. And it was after the Obergefell decision in 2015, right? Guess how much of an increase there was in gay marriage, right? Guess how much?
Guess?
You would think
in what time period? What time period?
2%.
Yeah, not that much.
We shook the bedrock of our nation and upended the traditional marriage because we were told that it would create equality for all and make America a more just place for tens of millions of Americans.
All 2%.
2%.
Wow.
And now all of a sudden, there's something called a slippery slope, and that's not a fallacy, and we have drag queen story hours because we wanted those 2% to be able to get married.
Well, I mean, and I think that, when it comes to this poll, it's indicative of people in their lived experience. You always hear about this. Oh, this is my lived experience. And what is being purported when it comes to lived experience is that is reality. Lived experience is somehow your reality. It's somehow reality. And to see that, it's indicative of people not really knowing the truth. And because they don't know the truth, they're going to go by their lived experience and all about their feelings and all about their emotions. They're going to vote based on that. And that's where we go wrong in this country.
Crazy. Well, thank you, Jobob, for sharing that with us.
It's crazy.
Proof of the silent majority that should be silent no more. Our friends at Freedom Square are working very hard to help make the silent majority a lot louder. Check out this message from them now.
All right, guys, you have signed up, right? You've joined freedomsquare.com. If you haven't, why not? This should have happened a decade ago. How did somebody not think of this earlier? If you're a business owner, we have a business directory to promote your business to patriots across the nation. So if you want to buy American, if you want to sell American, we have a business directory. Whatever it is, go now.
Join us in the fight for freedom. Welcome to Freedom Square.
Back for one last thing here at TPUSA HQ for live. We've got Stephen, Connor, Jobob, and Isabel, but these are not going to be our names for much longer because fun little surprise for you guys. We ran our birth months through a leprechaun name generator.
The culture, not a costume, Isabel.
I'm so excited
deeply
to tell
offended
you
by this
your
segment.
leprechaun names. Okay, first one is myself. I am Greeny Dancy Feet. Nice to meet you, everyone.
Let's go.
This is very fun. Connor, I find your name so fitting.
The most applicable?
It is the most appropriate, randomly generated name I've ever heard. Connor, who's always very opinionated, always has something to say, is Feisty O'Cabbage.
Yes!
I like that a lot.
It's a good leprechaun name.
I call you Cabbage. What up, Cabbage?
What up, Cabbage? That's in my baby name list.
Feisty. I love it. I love it. Jobob. You are Four-Leaf Tiny Toes. Nice to meet you.
Let's get it.
What does that have to do with Irish culture at all?
The Irish have
Because the
stubby
leprechauns,
toes.
they're tiny.
Oh, really?
Is that actually
And the most obvious leprechaun in the group, Stephen,
Clearly.
you are Fiddle's Dancy Feet.
Hey!
Nice to meet you,
A lot of
Fiddles.
foot focus in this thing.
I know,
The
it's
Irish going on
almost
right
like
here.
the person creating this generator was attracted to one thing in particular.
One thing only.
We have a fun video to share with you guys too for one last thing. Let's check it out.
What?
Oh, maybe.
Hey!
Why? Why?
Hey!
Oh, look at
I
Look at him go.
Wait, you're not on yet.
Wait,
We're not back yet. Wait,
Let's-
hold on. Wait a second.
Okay, you guys missed
missed
that.
the
We
whole
just had a
segment. Where
leprechaun
did we
run
go?
through that was not even shown. But he
You
brought us
gotta come back because
gold.
nobody saw that.
Very fun.
It wasn't on
Come
the
back.
thing.
I want some more gold.
Back,
I want some more
leprechaun.
gold.
There
I'm
we
greedy.
go.
This is.
Give me some more. Give me some more.
Here's some more gold.
Yeah.
Steven Dance right there.
Reparations.
Oh, yeah, here you go.
I need all of yours. All of it. All of it.
Wow, it is a
That went pretty
chaotic
fast.
day
I'm sorry about that.
here on set.
Who is that?
The costume's very convincing. All right, what do you guys have planned for your St. Patrick's Day in our last couple of minutes?
Workout.
Nice.
Yes.
I'm not shocked by any means, but it's a good plan.
Some Irish
I still
games.
need you to take me to the gym because Stephen and I have been talking about this for a long time. I lost like all of my muscle mass after I had a big kidney surgery in
We're gonna
November.
build it all back.
I need it, and I feel like looking at Stephen, he's probably the obvious choice of who I should be hitting the gym with, so we should go. Connor, what about you?
Look, I've got a lot of work to do, frankly. We're going to be working just like the Irish because they're good, industrious people, and that's how we're going to operate.
You're not going to come up with some cool experimental new St. Patrick's Day recipe, perhaps, Chef Connor? Or should I say Chef Feisty O'Cabbage?
No, in honor of the Irish potato famine, we're actually doing a fast tonight.
Oh, there you go. It's
my
nice.
culture.
I love that.
That's
Very
not true.
cool.
You bought that. That's fascinating.
We were
Do I look like someone who fasts? So I don't think so. I don't
That's
think so.
amazing. Jobob?
I'm going to be celebrating my obvious Irish heritage by going to a fine Mexican eating establishment and getting a burrito. Because burritos are better than corned beef cabbage. It doesn't matter who you are, that's an objective truth.
Well, I too will be working, Rip. So there you go.
So much for
Sometimes you just gotta get the grind. Am I right, you guys? What do we think John's doing right now?
Dancing, clearly.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
What would his dancing name be, or his Irish name be? It would definitely be something dancing.
Yeah, something. Jiggy McO'Hannah.
Getting jiggy with it, exactly.
Yeah, something like that.
Well, he said he was hoping to embrace some dude with sign moments at the NCAA Women's Championship.
Did you give him any sign suggestions?
I did. I don't want to give them all away to our viewers because I want them to see them all on Breakaway, but I am so excited that he's going to cover this issue. I think it's just going to be a really interesting conversation to have with the American people at some point when we decide what is a woman, because it's a little asinine to me. But
I mean, I think we decided a long time ago.
That's not
not we.
I feel
like we as a country, more accurately.
I feel like we should be in ridicule mode. I told John to go get a females.
He's back.
Okay.
This is to account for inflation.
Maybe I can put this in the slot machine at the gas station later.
It's a good time to remind you to invest in gold, right?
Yes.
Because it's
Real
the only thing
assets,
that's going to.
people.
Yeah, exactly.
I told John that he should get a women's swimsuit and a wig and go try and beat the slowest.
Why
not?
I said
Because
he
it
should do
would
like
be-
a live show.
Because
dressed
he's a
as
tall guy.
Joanna
but
Cruz
hang on.
and go from there.
I don't know if John wants me to say this, but he doesn't know how to swim.
Oh. Well, you can join my ranks since I don't know how to swim either.
All right, guys. Well,
Big
thank you so
surprise.
much for joining us, Stephen, Connor, Jobob. I'm Isabel. We will see you guys back here on the couch tomorrow for TPUSA Live.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard today's edition of Human Events Daily, powered by Turning Point USA. Today's top stories. First up, of course, we are going to be continuing our coverage, the war in Ukraine, as we now enter day 22, week 3 of this conflict. Next, the Federal Reserve is increasing interest rates, as predicted, for the first time since 2018. Third, a new Iran deal looks like it is being pushed through, would provide Russia with $10 billion contract to build new nuclear sites and expand nuclear sites within Iran. And then finally, we're going to be talking about the story about the cartel leader El Huevo, who has been captured and now deported to the United States. All this and more ahead, Human Events Daily.
We were part of the Georgia National Legion, the 102nd Ukrainian Territorial Defense. Okay? Our base got up. The base right next to us got up. Americans, British, tons of British dead. All right? They're not saying nothing. They're counting our dead as their dead. They're trying to send us to Kiev with no weapons, no kit, no plates. The people who are lucky enough to get weapons are only getting magazines with like 10 rounds, okay? When they wanted to send us to Kiev, we said no. Our whole group, a bunch of Americans, Canadians, British. So they told us we had to get the out or they were going to shoot us in the back, all right? So me, this British guy, and another American, we hid in the back of an ambulance to get out.
All right, so that video you just heard, a foreign fighter from the United States traveled to Ukraine seeking fame and fortune, posting on Snapchat about how things are going. Now, there are other people who've come out. They say they have different experiences since they've been on the ground. Haven't heard more from this foreign fighter. Turns out this guy actually was a member of the Boogaloo Boys group, which was this anti-U.S. government extremist group that at one point was supporting Black Lives Matter, was supporting Antifa during the George Floyd riots. Now you've got those guys going over and traveling to work with the Ukrainians and this so-called Georgia Legion. So lots of different groups that are operating in Ukraine right now. It is a complete crap show when it comes to these foreign volunteers, Western volunteers. Look, if you think that you're going to go do something like that, and be on the ground and being involved in a war zone like this against a conventional military with cruise missiles, with aircraft, with Su-25s, right? Understand what you were getting into. This is not a video game. This is not Call of Duty. This is real life. Now, going in, ground battle update, day 22. This is, of course, from ISW, understandingwar.org. Russia is deploying reserves from Armenia and South Ossetia and cohering new battalion tactical groups, BTGs, from the remnants of other units. So they're taking units that sustained some losses early on in the invasion. They're creating new battle tactical groups to be able to come together as they move for their encirclement of Kiev. These forces will likely face equal or greater command and logistical difficulties to current frontline Russian units. President Zelensky on the Ukrainian side has created a new joint military-civilian headquarters responsible for the defense of Kiev on March 15th. Russian forces are also still continuing their probing attacks northwest of Kiev, but we have not seen any of those offensive operations northeast of Kiev on March 16th. Russian forces are continuing their shelling in Kharkiv, but have been unlikely to force the city, or it says they are unlikely to force the city to surrender without encircling it. Of course, they are most likely going to encircle Kharkiv. That has been their strategy from day one with this. In terms of the Mariupol pocket, they are continuing to reduce that. What they're doing is they're carving up Mariupol across multiple lines. Now we are seeing, and there's videos of this coming out, thousands and thousands of civilians now are finally getting out of Mariupol. We were told earlier that they were having trouble getting down these set up humanitarian corridors. They were having trouble getting out of the city. Both sides blamed the others, but it seems that as the Russians have gotten into Mariupol, now civilians are able to get out on these humanitarian corridors, with some numbers saying tens of thousands of civilians have gotten out, which obviously, thank God, that is happening right now. Of course, we want to make sure that every instance can be done to make sure to help the civilian refugees, the civilian population that are victims of this invasion, that are caught up in this fighting. The same way that civilians always have to suffer whenever people go to war. You know, I've said before, I'll say it again, war is a racket. People are getting paid, right? Every time there's a shipment of weapons, every time there's a shipment of gear, we now hear that the United States will be providing over 100 armed drones to the Ukrainian side. Remember, people are getting paid. Lockheed, Raytheon, they are getting paid. What are they getting paid with? Your tax dollars. And whether that be through spending, and then you have to pay the tax through inflation, whether that be through printing, whether it be through borrowing, it still comes on the backs of the American people. And so we haven't heard any updates yet in the peace process. What is going on with this? Is Ukraine, and it looks like they're saying that they want to be out of NATO, but they're also asking for security guarantees from the West in case they're attacked. So that essentially would be an Article 5 guarantee without the broader spectrum of NATO. Russia, by the way, doesn't seem like they're going to go for this. They're also calling for international force in Ukraine. Russia probably will also not go for that as well. And so it seems that the peace talks as of now have reached a stalemate here on day 22.
At the Federal Reserve, we are strongly committed to achieving the monetary policy goals that Congress has given us: maximum employment and price stability. Today, in support of these goals, the FOMC raised its policy interest rate by 1/4 percentage point. The economy is very strong, and against the backdrop of an extremely tight labor market and high inflation, the committee anticipates that ongoing increases in the target range for the federal funds rate will be appropriate. In addition, we expect to begin reducing the size of our balance sheet at a coming meeting. As we emphasize in our policy statement, with appropriate firming in the stance of monetary policy, we expect inflation to return to 2% while the labor market remains strong.
So that's Jerome Powell there saying that, of course, as predicted, we are now seeing an increase in interest rates from the Fed. What does that mean going forward? Well, Zero Hedge has the article up. It says they will be paralyzed when the Fed is moving too slowly. We are possibly getting the worst of all worlds. This will be bad for the economy and could also lead to dramatic political repercussions. The U.S. administration has tried to claim otherwise out of some combination of duplicity and stupidity, but inflation is quite regressive. Rich people can only spend so much on food and gas and basic staples, and even filling up a G-Wagon and flying in elk steaks from Wyoming costs a trivial percentage of income and wealth. But regular people, especially regular people on fixed incomes, are getting badly damaged. And those people will be voting come November. So understand, right? Understand. Energy prices are going up. When energy prices go up, everything goes up. Also, you had massive printing early on in the Biden administration. This quantitative easing, money printer, go burr, whatever you want to call it, this was done by the Fed. And we talked about this again and again. That money, right, that's printed out, that doesn't go to you and me. That doesn't go to the regular folks out there. That doesn't go to your family. And I've seen some people also saying that, oh, well, what about the stimulus checks? Wasn't the stimulus checks, a bunch of money? Yeah, no. That was a drop in the bucket compared to the $14 trillion in printing that was done. More money than has ever been printed in the history of the United States was done by this Fed. And they did so by handing it out to their buddies so that they could set up, well, I guess they'd already had set up, but now they implemented and executed this ESG system, the social credit score system. And it's all under the aegis of the Great Reset, that they call it. They say, well, we're going to change the economy. We're going to change the economy. But we've talked to you before as well about the Canteen Effect. What does that mean? The people closest to the king are the ones who benefit when there is money printing at the expense of the people furthest away from the throne, right? This is from the Kingdom of France years and years ago. And what does that mean? Well, that means that the inflation doesn't affect the people who are getting the free money, right? Who are getting these loans that at that point had been at no interest, or now it's at a tiny little bit of interest, right? The prices don't go up for them because they're the ones who are the first movers. So they are able to go out and make their purchases, and as Eurohedge was saying, it's a trivial percentage of their income and wealth. But when the prices go up, who does it affect? It affects the people on the fixed income. So that means your money in your bank account, that means your wages, that means your savings, they're all being devalued. Now you couple that with everything that we've been talking about in terms of the fall of the petrodollar and the rise of the petro-yuan. Russia, China, and Iran, and we're going to talk about Iran in a second, they are working together to create a non-US dollar monetary bloc. And by doing so, they are going to devalue that. This is going to happen. It is happening. It's already happening. Our government understands it. Our Fed understands it. Wall Street understands it. So we're trying to explain this so that you, the people that listen to this, will understand this. You need to start getting your family financially secure and financially stable for when the US dollar becomes devalued, because they are challenging the world reserve status of the US dollar. And whether it's the yuan or a crypto yuan or a central bank digital currency that China issues, that all remains to be seen. But the point is, the US dollar does not seem long for this world in terms of being that world reserve currency. And that's why the administration is going out hat in hand to Venezuela, to Saudi Arabia, who's not even returning our calls, right, to the UAE. Please, please, please continue trading oil in US dollars. But they're not getting a response because the world is making their move. So what does that mean for you? That means you have to hedge against it. You've got to get your money out of cash and you've got to put it into investments that are going to be safe. Why do you think Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and all these people are putting their money into real estate, into food producing land, right? Their money managers, they get where this is going. They can see the writing on the wall. What I'm trying to do is help you understand that so that you and your family's future will be secured. MyPillow.com, promo code POSO. That is the three little words that every man is waiting to hear, and that every wife is waiting to hear as well. She says, I want to hear those three little words. It's simple. Promo code POSO. Now, I'm not sure if is that 3 words? Is that 2 words? I guess you could write a promo code POSO. There's 3 little words right there, folks. That's all you need right there. You get the towels, you get the sheets, you get the toppers. I guarantee you, ladies and gentlemen, fellas, you want to make her happy, you just say those 3 little words. Promo code POSO. All right, Got to get this next story in all seriousness. New Iran agreement coming down the pike. So in the midst of all that the United States is doing in President Biden's wisdom and his genius, he is giving us a foreign policy which would allow Russia to cash in on $10 billion in contracts to build nuclear sites in Iran. That's smart. That's a good foreign policy. Great job, President Biden. Great job, White House, neurotic millennials, and West Wing LARPers. You've done a good thing by letting Iran build nuclear sites and freeing up, unfreezing this $10 billion contract with Russia. It's also one of those situations where you just look at it and you're like, these guys play to win. The Russians play to win, clearly. The Iranians play to win. Beijing plays to win. And what do? We just play. We literally just play. So here's Jen Psaki yesterday trying to come to some semblance of understanding or explaining why this is going on. Take a listen.
And then moving on to the nuclear deal. General McKenzie told the Armed Services Committee that from everything that he can see, the IRGC is a terrorist organization. Is the White House willing to delist the IRGC from the foreign terrorist organization list in order to get a deal with Iran?
We're still in the negotiations, so I'm not going to speculate or outline from here what the final details look like.
And by the way, the company that's getting the $10 billion in terms of this is Rosatom. You might remember Rosatom. Who were they? Why does that sound familiar? Oh, right. They're the ones who eventually bought Uranium One. Thank you, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Do you understand how stupid and corrupt our government is? Right? They understand this. Putin understands this. He's been running the tables on the Clinton family and the Biden family and everybody else for years. He put you in this position to weaken you, to strengthen his own hand, and he's working with Beijing now against your interests. Wake up. You've been played. Paid you off with what, 500 grand? That's all it took? That's all it took to sell out your country. What was there, Hunter Biden? $83,000 a month to sell out the people of Ukraine and to sell out the people of the United States. And it's as simple as that. And look, it is not, right? It is not unpatriotic to call out the lies of the warmongers. It is your patriotic duty to call out the lies of the warmongers and explain the truth of what's going on behind all of this. So they think that Iranian oil being put back on the world market is going to lower the oil price. And it probably will, which will eventually lower the price of the pump. But what happens then? No American energy independence. So you're helping Iran and you're helping Russia and you're hurting the United States of America. Great job. Well, the biggest story in the country that no one is talking about, a cartel leader, the leader of the Northeast Cartel, Juan Gerardo Trevino Chavez, El Huevo, his moniker, captured in Northeast Mexico, deported to the United States. A U.S. consulate comes under fire. And yet, I look across media in the United States, I can't find a thing. You go to media in Mexico, they're all talking about this story. Huge, huge news. Massive battles that are taking place, the federales. It looks like the United States played, a significant role in this roll-up, in this raid. They get this guy. He's been extradited, so that's the latest. And so we'll break that down in a second. But what blows my mind is that you see this level of violence. You see this level of cartel violence that's going on across the border, like literally right across the border, a stone's throw from the U.S. homeland. Not 5,000 miles away, not 500 miles away, 5 feet away, 5 minutes away from U.S. soil, our sovereignty, right? This is our territory. This is the hemisphere where we live. This is our backyard. There is a cartel war that is going on right now in the narco state directly to our south. And yet for some reason, you don't hear people talk about that. Sure, they might make some glib lip service, statement about, when you talk to U.S. politicians about, oh, we need border security, but they don't explain the fact that you've got massive swaths of territory in Mexico that are directly controlled by cartels. They're not even controlled by the Mexican government. They've lost control of them. Right? We used to talk about this in Afghanistan when we would say the Afghan government doesn't have control over certain provinces, the Taliban does. But for some reason, we don't talk about Mexico that way. Talk about Afghanistan that way. Talk about Russia and Ukraine that way right now. Which territories does Russia have control over versus Ukraine? Yet we've got a situation very similar to one of those right on our front doorstep. And our media couldn't care less. And the American people, because they're focused on the media constantly, if the mainstream media doesn't talk about it every day, then they're focused on this. They don't talk about the beheadings in Mexico that are going on. They don't talk about the women and children that are butchered by these cartels. This guy, by the way, his uncle was one of the leaders of the Zeta cartel. If you understand who the Zetas are and the way that they were founded with training from U.S. military special forces, U.S. Army special forces, who then broke away from the Mexican military and formed a cartel. Some of the most brutal killings that this hemisphere has seen in centuries are going on under this cartel. And now this guy, El Huevo, was setting up his own operation. And so the latest on him, he was deported to the United States in the first minutes of Tuesday, March 15th in Tijuana in Baja California on the bridge that connects with San Diego, California. Federal forces transferred the alleged criminal from Mexico City to the northern border on a federal plane. The expedited form was then due to the man, and apparently he is a U.S. citizen. They couldn't actually find records of him in Mexico. Massive story, right? So we'll get these TV shows like Breaking Bad or Narcos, but you don't hear the truth of it, and you don't hear the reporting on it in the mainstream media. And why is that? You answer that question, you will know everything. And that is all the time we have for Human Events Daily today. Remember, our promise, our oath, our solemn vow to you: be good, be brief, be gone. Today we covered what's going on the ground, the encirclement of Kiev, the bottling up and the quartering of Mariupol in Ukraine. Next, we talked about how the Fed is raising interest rates. We got into the insane Iran deal that our government is pushing because they are idiots. And finally, we talked about the capture and deport of El Huevo, which no one else is talking about. Why? Because the rest of the media apparently is corrupt and doesn't care about what's going on our own borders and in our own hemisphere that directly affects American citizens. But before we go, it's time for today's history break. Today, of course, St. Paddy's Day. But how many people remember that St. Patrick was not some secular mythical figure? He was a real person. He was a bishop, and he taught the importance of the Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, using the shamrock as a way to explain it to the Irish people that he was baptizing over 1,000 years ago. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, you have my permission.
Welcome to Debate Night, powered by Turning Point USA. Tonight, Charlie Kirk will debate Rachel Bitecofer, political strategist and founder of Strike Pack. Tonight's topic is banning CRT in schools necessary. Rachel, you have the floor.
Yeah, it's really difficult for me to start off talking about CRT because most of America, I have no idea what the hell it is. So, I'm happy to talk a little bit about CRT as I think it means, which is probably more blanket about diversity, inclusion education, rather than the actual critical race theory, which is only taught in law schools, as you know, and not something that I am well versed in to discuss as an expert. But I will tell you, in terms of the critical race theory stuff, that it is being talked about in politics. I think for the average listener, they're hearing something about diversity and inclusion programming at school, and certainly think we see that reflected in legislation that's being crafted for CRT, because it does not say, hey, in K through 12 education, we're not going to have we want to have proper curriculum, and we're not going to have this high-level college course like material, right, in our K through 12. The bans, as they're being written, include things like diversity. It could fall in anyway into diversity and inclusion education. So, I'm very excited to be here to talk about that and debate out whether or not we should be talking about diversity and inclusion in schools, and what the proper role for government in terms of curriculum is too, which I think is going to be an issue that's going to be really important to you.
Great.
So, yeah.
You put me in a really tough spot because you're a Duck fan.
Yeah.
I'm not like a passive Duck fan.
No.
Not like I'm kind of actually a real Duck fan. So I have to be really nice to you.
Yep.
And I will anyway. So we can disagree on that no matter what. Go Ducks, everybody. So yeah, look, I think that what we're gonna figure out what we both mean. So I'm gonna try not to talk past each other. But I mean, look, CRT as it's written, as it was literally in the Intro to Critical Race Theory in 1991 by Delgado, was basically saying what we would call today as very racist. And it is being taught in elementary schools and grade schools. The essence of it, right? It might not be taught as the complex, esoteric legal theory, but also it's coming into policy as well. It's coming into policy of actually how we educate kids, from segregated classrooms in Atlanta to black-only dormitories at Western Washington University. So it's more than just kind of a issue in curriculum. It's actually changing the way education itself is done, which I think is something that we need to explore. And I think it's also super evil to say that white kids should go to one classroom and black kids should go to one classroom. I thought we kind of ended that chapter in our country, maybe not, through the Civil Rights Act, amongst many other things. So look, CRT as it was written, as far as intro to critical race theory back in 1990s, literally I could read the words for you, but it's somewhat just reiterating that it's racist, pure and simple. They want to change the way that we structure conversations on race. They want to view people through a racial lens. And I grew up in an America where I went to a very diverse high school where that was de-emphasized. And I believe race should be de-emphasized, especially in the education of our children. And even beyond that, segregating kids in school, I think, is plain evil.
Great. Yeah, no, I mean, I think it would surprise most people to find out that today's education, the K through 12 system, is actually more racially segregated than it was at the height of segregation. And that's all by choice and mobility, people moving out of the cities and into the suburbs and so on and so forth. And it's certainly not reflective to all school districts, but in places like Alabama, it is absolutely the case where we are producing naturally through the free market, if you want to put it on that, a segregated world, right? So then you have to think about, well, why? Why are people still naturally, behaviorally keen to segregate, right? And it's easy, I think, for two white people, myself and you both grew up in pretty similar circumstance, I'm sure, a middle-ish class life and in the Navy, and lots of diversity. I also thought we were living in a post-race world, right? If we can't talk about race, how are we going to foster an environment where people feel comfortable being with people that they don't feel are in their racial tribes, right? So if we decide that any conversation about race is by inherently racial or racist, as your terminology goes, it makes it very difficult, I think, for people who are interested in coalition building, community building, dealing with what we would call de facto segregation, so not by law but by behavior. And I guess I would be interested to hear, if we don't want to talk about diversity, how do we achieve those goals? Since you seem very keen to be, living in a post-racial
Rachel, your time
world.
is up.
Yeah, I mean,
Charlie, you have 1 minute.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I was raised in that country. I went to a high school that was 53% Hispanic.
Mm-hmm.
I was a minority as a white Christian male, and no one talked about race, and it was great. We talked about character. So I don't need to be lecturing in some sort of hypothetical world. I was raised in that world. and it was awesome. Everyone got along. I mean, you were in the Navy, or you grew up around the Navy, that's right, and so maybe you have your own different experience with that. But the more we talk about race, the more we actually bring those demons of our past to the forefront. Like, we're actually producing racism, we're manufacturing it. There's a supply and demand problem with racism in our country, where there's an incredible demand to try to find it, and we're trying to increase the supply of it. And when you have playgrounds in Denver where you say white families are not allowed to come, black families only, how is that not just reinstituting the same segregational policies that we said were evil in the 1930s and 40s, which they are, and then just flipping it on its side to say, actually, now we're going to be racist to white people, which is actually the creed of Ibram X. Kendi. He says, segregation today to fix segregation of yesterday.
I mean, I won't do the typical liberal thing, which would be to point out, the statistics about home ownership and historic racism and why you might need affirmative action to achieve diversity, because I think that will just take us down a rabbit hole. And I really want more, I think, to talk about the substance of, America. So it is true that when we were children, and I'm 10 years older than you, we did not have curriculum that dealt with diversity and inclusion at all. And like the American for Disabilities Act was in its infancy. So like programs for students like my son with autism were few and far between in K through 12. So we're really talking about a school environment now that has been spending, 20 years kind of building up an infrastructure that's more focused on, community building exercises, getting people to be accepting and tolerant of others, reducing school bullying and, suicide and issues with kids. And I just don't know how we can have a conversation without mentioning race when we're talking about, an inclusive environment.
Do you think there's something, I'm just going to ask a question, do you think there's something morally wrong with black-only graduation ceremonies?
So I would argue that there is definitely something wrong with anything that is exclusive, unless we're talking about a situation where you talk about being a minority in your high school, right?
Well, certainly not a minority in the country, but yes, in the high
and
school.
I also went to a very diverse high school. Yes. It was at least 50% African American, right? The thing that I noticed about it, for me, it was a real shock the first day I enrolled, because I came from a smaller city first and moved into that, to see this is the first environment I've ever sat in where not everyone's white, right? I mean, at least half the people around me were black. And what I would have liked back then is some direction on getting to know people from a different world, right? Like, our problem is siloing too much, right? With all the technology we have, we're only hanging out with people that agree with us, come from our own walk of life. For example, when you mix people together, you get things that you could not have in a homogenous environment with one representative of that minority group. So I just, I think it's important to keep in context that too, like the America that I grew up in the 80s and the 90s for you is much more diverse, right? So I don't see the need for diversity and inclusion education for perpetuity.
But isn't like, for example, a black-only graduation ceremony, isn't the opposite of diversity?
So where was a black-only celebration?
Columbia University.
Okay, and why was it black-only?
Good question.
No, I mean, literally, what was the rule that made it black-only?
Because they said they're uncomfortable around white people.
Oh, really? So it was a private ceremony.
Yes, and white people weren't allowed.
You know what? I'm going to be very steady across things. And when I was teaching in Georgia, I had found out that there was a high school in Georgia still doing a whites-only prom.
I think that's evil.
In 2012, dude. It was like 2013.
I think that's evil.
You can Google it. It's true.
And you agree that?
And definitely. And the way that they were doing that, by the way, is going into private education, which is really important conversation I think we should have, because when you're in the private sector, you can do things like black only or white only. And I definitely agree that we want to.
Not anymore. Civil Rights Act disallows that. But we could talk about that in a sec. So you live in Oregon?
I do.
Yeah, there's a black only school that's been chartered. Do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing?
I have not looked at that, so I'm not going to comment on that at all.
Right.
But, to me, imagine...
Suburbs of Portland, yeah.
So here's one thing that really sticks with me. Have you ever read the book Caste by Isabella Wilkerson? No. Okay. I read that book. It was a hard read, and history is a hard read if we, take a hard look at all history, not just the U.S. history, right?
Yeah.
I've been studying world civilization pretty intensely over the last year. And there's commonalities in human behavior that are not unique to America.
I agree.
Right? So to me,
our story's exceptional, but yeah, for sure.
It is. It's an exceptional story, but there are things that are commonalities between us and other people in other countries,
Yeah,
right?
I totally agree.
And one thing that humans unfortunately have a default setting to is violence and intolerance.
This conversation has been very informative so far. Let's keep the good dialogue going. Rachel, let's pick up with you.
Yeah, no, so, all right. It's difficult to imagine what it would be like to be in a place where you stood out a lot, right? I mean, you know, you're a handsome guy, so you
Thank
stand
you.
out that way.
You know, most of my detractors would completely disagree.
Oh, you got the hair.
You're the first
Jesus,
liberal to ever call
that
me
hair
handsome.
is just, you know, to die for.
Oh.
Yeah.
You quote that, everybody.
Charlie Kirk has hair to die for.
There you go.
There you go. But other than that, don't take this now. I'm going to let you down.
Oh, here
You're
we go.
pretty nondescript, right? And so am I. And, you know, I don't know that we can understand what it would be like to be not nondescript in the sea of people who all have this commonality and you do not, right? So I think, you know, when we think about what diversity and inclusion education, which is to me more useful to talk about than a legal
No, that's
theory.
fine, but like I'm using examples of how we're actually organizing education.
Yeah,
right.
right.
So like at Western Washington University, they have black-only dorms. That's the opposite of diversity.
Yeah, but I mean, imagine if you were the, let's say you're 10% of a university, like CNU had fantastic racial diversity, still like 20%, right?
So like if I went to an HBCU, which I wouldn't, like I don't know if I would get in or not, but like I guess they can't discriminate in race, and I had a white-only dorm, that would be bad.
Yes, because you're at a black college. It would be weird, right?
Yeah, so do you get what I'm saying? No, it's like this is no longer like theory. We're like
yeah,
organizing.
But I mean, think about it the other way. Like,
education.
not every black student can afford a private tuition at HBCU. Those are extraordinarily expensive,
but
right?
Western
and
Washington,
usually competitive for admissions. So, like, if you go to a normal university, and the University of Georgia is a great example of this because we both hate their football program because it has our natty.
Yeah.
Our natty.
We stole their football coach.
No, we did. We did get revenge, didn't we, Charlie? Give me. Yeah, there we go. Nah, damn Lenny. All right. Anyway, you distracted me. But at University of Georgia, where the population of that state is 30%. Okay, 30%.
Black. Yes.
Black. The university's student body, when I was there for that 4 or 5 years, was only 10% black.
Right.
So imagine then, if like I'm trying to guess. I guess I'm trying to explain, like, what would it be like if we took Charlie Kirk and dropped him in an African country where he was the minority student? He would probably feel lonely and want to have programs that help him.
Well, look,
build
I mean, I hate to
solidarity.
like say that I haven't lived anything close to that, but I did grow up in a high school where I wasn't the majority.
Right.
And I didn't feel like inclined to go start a white-only group.
Do you think you would have, though, if it was 90-10?
No, I see. This is important. Whether I would have or not is irrelevant. Whether it's right or not. See, like, if you're in the minority...
Well, people do things that are wrong all the time.
I agree, so it's wrong. So the fact they're doing it doesn't mean it's right. So, like, rebuilding the tribe is bad. Not that if you want to do it, like, of course, in your natural instinct, you want to be in your tribe.
Right.
But, like, what makes the West different is we tried to break the tribes apart.
Yeah, I mean, there's a natural melting pot of that.
At least an attempt
identity.
to try to get there, right?
Yes,
so
very much.
What CRT is, or whatever you want to call it, and I think we're agreeing on some of this, is like in Atlanta and in Portland, all these places where they start to put people back in their tribe. It doesn't matter if people would want that; it's wrong.
Yeah, I think too, like, we really need to think about, like, okay, if we have this natural segregation still in society, and it's causing so much political animus, right? This, I don't know if you've ever heard the book by Robert Putnam called Bowling Alone.
Yeah, I've heard about it. Yeah,
how
bowling leagues used to be a very big deal.
Yeah,
sure.
but mostly it's about you and me, right? We would never maybe get along, except for, turns out we're both like diehard season ticket holding Duck fans.
That's exactly right.
Right, and like that's all that matters, right? Like, so now you and I go to a game. I mean, I'm not saying we're going to do this, America, but you and I are at a game, and we're shooting the shit, and you realize, oh man, you know what? Not all liberals are. Okay, this woman,
and
she likes to blow shit up. Yeah, and not all conservatives are fascist, right?
She said it.
She likes to blow up fireworks. She likes to drink beer. She can talk with me on football, and it breaks the caricatures that we tend to draw about people we don't know. And so, I agree with you. I don't think we disagree that, moving backwards into safe spaces, to use your word,
or like tribal
is
spaces,
ideal, because what we really need in America more than anything everything else is more time together, right? We need more people doing more things
I think
together.
we just ended the debate.
Yeah, that's right. Let's go watch some football.
Because CRT is doing the opposite. It just is. Like, you read their literature, Ibram X. Kendi, who's like the archbishop of this stuff, he's like, we need more segregation. Like, he's supporting this stuff. And I agree, like, we should be trying to find things we have in common, not like, okay, you go to your corner and you go to your corner. That only makes the divisions further.
It does, and then like in a time like this where we're dealing with pressures, international pressures that the world has not faced since the 30s, right? We really want to be, I think, getting our domestic house in order, and I think that's something that I and others have been arguing for a long time. But now we're really starting to see, division in America politically, domestic politics, especially about stupid, is really going to endanger our international efforts here dealing with a military aggressive
So I'm going to go
Russia.
a step further. Like, the way I framed it, and you agreed with most of it, do you now understand why most parents are really scared and like apprehensive of this being implemented, right? Because they don't want that vision. They don't want 1950s America where it was segregated.
Yes, but so here's the thing: is we're no between the two of
I'm
us,
not.
right?
I don't want segregation.
Is a topic of debate, but it is also a political tool, right? And it is a very handy political tool because for the average Virginia suburban person, like when they hear CRT and they see conversations, about books that have racy stuff in it, like that stuff taps right into emotion, right? Fear, threat, and emotion. So, to me, whether or not the merits of CRT, a theory like that in the right setting, certainly not in K through 12, but diversity and inclusion education in K through 12, to me, those things, you have to take into account that, the difference of how an average person's going to hear that, right? They're not going to realize, oh, what Charlie Kirk means is, this theory that, the whole system is designed in a supremacist way, and that, the white power structure has, rigged the rules, da 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 da. That's not what a parent hears. What a parent hears is, they're making my kid feel bad about being white.
Well, yeah, let's
right?
just start with, okay, that's fair. What's wrong with a parent being upset about that? Like, should a kid feel bad for something he didn't do?
Well, I mean, it all's fair in love and politics, right? And especially here in American politics, where we don't have any regulation on campaign speech, on campaign material, and stuff like that. So, to my answer would be
regulation. That's not totally true, but
well,
yeah,
very little, right? And so, like, what my answer would be to that is, it's a handy, expedient political weapon, and because of that, Democrats should behoove themselves to answering it with a counteroffense.
Okay,
right?
so I'm actually really curious to what you think the counteroffense is, but like, let's just kind of forget the political charge of it. If a kid comes home and is being taught he's terrible because he's white, or that's how he feel, isn't there something wrong with that? Shouldn't that be fixed? Like, no 8-year-old should have to feel guilt because of something he didn't do.
Yeah, it's just, but like, where are the 8-year-olds that are coming home like that? I have not met one. Like,
the whole Virginia election kind of showed that there's plenty, right?
Well, no, I mean, the perception is different than actuality, right? So, like, my goal, Charlie, is to create a perception this election cycle that's pretty similar to things about like CRT or what have you. And, what CRT is advantaged for is it hits at this base pressure that's really hitting the electorate right now, because we're in this America that didn't exist 40 years ago. It didn't exist in terms of racial diversity. It didn't exist in terms of gender and racial, like, de jure equality, right? So we're really looking at a society that's been extremely pressured, and that's why you see this international too, in other Western democracies. The heterogeneity of the modern populations moving, globalization has really put a lot of pressure on, the hegemonic power structure, which of course is still white people in America. I mean, we still control most of the things.
I got to ask you, why the heck does that matter? What does race have to do with anything? Why does that matter to you?
So I think, like, the answer to that, and being a woman, I can't answer what it's like to be a racial minority. I can answer to what it's like to be a woman, right? And and we know this now from psychological research, that even people who want to be race blind, who feel and passionately feel about equality and stuff, when we test them in a lab, have racially, like they respond to race codes, right? So like, in laboratory settings, even liberals will respond differently to a black face than a white face, right? And because we have...
Are you talking about unconscious bias
Yes,
training?
unconscious
All been debunked.
bias.
None of it's true.
No, I mean, it's definitely
0%.
true. No.
Completely.
No.
Dr. Fryer, go read his stuff from Harvard.
Okay, but here's
it's a
the thing.
pile of garbage.
And this goes back to your piece in the very first piece you ever wrote that made you Charlie Kirk.
Okay,
right?
so the economics textbook?
Yes,
one?
yes.
Wow, you know my bibliography.
I told you I've watched you grow up, and I don't mean that in a condescending way.
No, it's fine.
I just
yeah.
mean my academic career has tracked
Okay.
with your career, and we're both Trump babies, right? I mean, Trump
You're a
made
Trump
you,
fan?
and Trump made me. Is just in different ways, right?
Okay.
So
you're a big Trump fan.
But so with your article on economics, which Paul Krugman aside, he's not a terrific economist.
No, he's actually
right?
awful. But
Yeah, I mean, actually, he's pretty run of the mill, right? Which is sometimes we see that in media. Not the best academics are doing academic research. Trust me, I'm not the best academic, and that's why you see me in the media, right? So anyway, with Krugman, when I wanted to see where your original spark was on the education issue, and I saw that it tied back to textbook language, so I went to look because we're going to talk about CRTs and textbooks and what the textbooks will look like for America,
10 years ago. Yeah.
right? So I did. So what I want to stress with you is this. Like the way that textbook is written is actually standard, and we can debate whether they should have citations, right? But like in the research world, and it doesn't matter if it's molecular biology or politics, there is an academic consensus about something, right? And when there is, it's pretty standard for them to say, most economists agree, or the prevailing, wisdom is this. When you are coming from something that is shattering a paradigm, usually other people will get into that. So eventually there's momentum for something to say this was wrong.
But they have been wrong and they can be wrong.
Yeah, but
right?
you can always, look at climate change, right? 10 years ago, there was a big effort to make, to promote scientific research that did not agree with the consensus, right? And on the political right especially. And they got a lot of...
What scientific consensus?
On climate change.
Yeah, but which part of it?
That climate change is man-made and occurring.
But to what extent?
I don't think that was the debate back then. The debate was...
anyone could say it's man. That's the whole point though, right? Is it 1%, 5%, 10%, 15, 20? If you can't prove it, then you're a novelist.
Not at all. Not at all.
So then what do you do? You're like, okay, man contributes to carbon emissions. Oh, really?
And 95% of science, the scientific consensus says that,
so
right? You can always find a detractor. And when a detractor is Galileo...
Or Copernicus.
But when it's
they change history.
When it's Galileo, though, what you will see eventually is a bandwagon effect. And if there was meat to the anti-climate research, then it would be there by now.
You know that's a flawed argument.
No, not at all.
Okay, so let's use another example. So basically you're saying if a majority of scientists agree with something, then it has momentum, it must be right.
No, not at all. I'm saying if it's wrong, someone will discover that's wrong, and through replication and verification, that fix will eventually become the prevailing wisdom.
I can think of so many examples why that's not
So if you were reading a textbook in a different time period, you would have had there would have been a different conversation about supply side economics, because in the 80s, that was a new policy.
Yeah, I'm not that interested in supply side economics right now, actually.
Let's keep the conversation moving.
Okay, so I want to go back to something though. Why does race matter?
I think race doesn't matter to white people because we are in a majority white system, and eventually we might notice how it feels to be not racially dominant when the world is no longer majority white, or at least our world isn't. And right now it's 66% still.
So besides melanin content, do you think there's differences between races?
Nope. Do you?
No, then why do we talk about it all the time?
I don't know.
Yeah, but you're talking about it. You're like, yeah, we need to talk. It should be irrelevant,
so,
right?
No.
Unless you think there's differences in races,
I'm here to talk about it with you. But what I would say to people is the topic, the conversation around race is not designed to have a substantive impact on race relations. It's designed to win a political argument, right? So, in terms.
What do you mean by race relations? I'm confused. How is America racist?
All right. Are you familiar at all with the concept of structural racism?
Yeah, it's a myth.
No, it's not.
So tell me why it's true.
Okay, so...
Not outcomes, tell me why it's true.
So the textbook that you hearken back to in the 1950s, right? I found one of those in Virginia. It was in publication
Yeah,
from 5. Yep. And so when we think about, like, how do you design curriculum that's historically accurate, that doesn't talk about oppression, that doesn't talk about one group being oppressed over the other, right? And so when you look at that Virginia textbook, I certainly don't argue that that's what we're looking at heading back towards. But my guess is if you were to try to write a curriculum that covers, you know, slavery in the U.S. or the, you know, Holocaust or whatever, and not, you know, give the narrative that this group did this horrible thing to the other group, you're going to have to rely on some pretty...
But it wasn't groups, though. That's incorrect. Not every white person was a slave owner.
Well, that doesn't matter, though, because, you know...
9 out of 13 states abolished slavery by the time of constitutional ratification.
I mean,
it's not like every white person was supportive. In fact, we had abolitionists at the time of the founding.
Exactly.
So why would you say one group?
Well, I mean, you know, it's not. You don't have to have every white person.
No, in fact, the majority of white people found slavery to be reprehensible at the founding.
I don't know that if we would have polled segregation.
No, we did actually
in the 50s, we would have found that.
Let's start with slavery. 9 out of 13 states abolished slavery by the time of constitutional ratification.
Yeah, then why did the South secede?
Well, they seceded post-Cotton Gin for economic reasons. We went to war over it, though. To say that America...
Well, you guys, the South declared war because they expected Lincoln to ban slavery.
And he ended up doing it.
Well, not for a long time. You know why? Because he wanted the fight to be about national unity, which is a good way to, I think, come wrapping around, right? National unity. So like, the first few years of the Civil War, he did not expressly say this war is about ending slavery.
He got to it.
And he later got
Cooper
to that
Union address,
because the South was more passionate and the North needed passion,
No, I know, but
right?
let's go. I mean, but you said something I want to focus on, though. One group doing something to the other. Like, that's just not true, right? It would be a small group of white people that exploited incorrectly a group of black people.
I think the crowds that would show up for the lynchings, according to research that I've read, numbered in like 5,000, and they would mail. They
But then
would
why
take
was
pieces,
slavery being abolished?
Pieces of like these people's bodies
I'm not supporting
souvenir
that.
them, right?
That's a
but like that is not a
pathos argument.
small. That's not a small group of people. That's not an isolated event.
Well, I mean, in certain states it was
massive
widespread.
Systemic problem, right?
9 states abolished it. Thomas Jefferson wrote in the original draft of the Declaration to King George, admonishing him for bringing slavery. The first ever anti-slavery convention was in Philadelphia, chaired by Benjamin Franklin in 1775. Yeah. Thomas Jefferson got rid of the importation of new slaves in 1807. Guess what? None of that stuff's taught in our schools right now.
Yeah, sure
because
it
of
is.
CRT. No, it's not.
Have you ever taught any kids
Hold
history?
I want you to
though?
go into
They don't
a
know
public
any of
school
that.
in Eugene and Portland and ask them, was Thomas Jefferson a racist or did he ban slaves coming into the United States? What would they say?
Charlie, I'm going to tell you this. Every semester
say?
I would ask my students, like, basic.
Okay, but I'm asking, like, which...
They don't know any of that
but
because
like,
they don't even, they're not, like, they're on their phones.
Oh, yeah, but
or
like,
whatever,
let's just talk about Thomas Jefferson.
And they don't even know the big main points of World War II or American
history. Do you think that most schools are teaching Thomas Jefferson to be a good person or a bad person?
Good person, yes, definitely.
Why are they taking down statues of him then?
Well, you know what? If you go into the deepest county in Alabama, where there's deep red Republicans, do you find them doing shit you don't agree with?
Well, give me an example. I've given you plenty. I don't know what you're talking about.
I mean, right now things are getting a little cloudy because some of the things that come out of those deep red pockets are becoming mainstream in Republican politics, right? I mean, CRT bans, right? So
Which
this idea of laws, I mean, to me, somebody who is offended by big government should be deeply offended by the idea of the government dictating curriculum.
No, the government should be small and strong. Do what it should do and do it correctly and quickly.
So defend CRT. There's 14 bills. They're being passed.
Yeah, so let's talk about the Texas CRT
it's not
law.
Small.
In the CRT law in Texas, it says, quote, "We want to fulfill the legacy of Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail, and I have a dream speech." They want to protect the Federal Civil Rights Act. They want to protect the United States Supreme Court decision in Brown versus the Board.
Right.
They want to talk about the Emancipation, talk about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and educate on the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. Why is that wrong?
It's not wrong, but I believe that they're also striking out some other things.
Let me tell you how they word it. Right, here's how they word it, though. They say that no person, any individual, should feel discomfort, guilt, or anguish, or any form of psychological distress on account of his or her race or sex. We agree with that.
Okay, but
That's the bill.
teach the Holocaust to German students or not? Because they're going to definitely feel
But I
uncomfortable.
wouldn't blame them for it.
Well, it's nobody's saying
That's-
you caused that.
That's
If
where
you
you're wrong.
Yeah, but so Charlie,
an
I
example.
can also find, and I didn't know I could have a ledger book or a cheat sheet, so I would
You
have
could do
brought
whatever
one.
you want. My memory is just not as good as yours.
My memory is horrible, actually. But here's the thing. You can always find exceptions to things,
No, this
outliers.
this is evidence,
right?
not exceptions.
You have, some wingnut people in San Fran. They live in a bubble, right? They think everybody thinks like them, and they pass stupid.
Okay, how about
right?
Springfield, Missouri?
Like renaming the school Lincoln.
Springfield, Missouri. Teachers were told to
But
rank themselves.
That is not a modal
Oh no, let me give you 4 examples.
policy
But
at
no,
all.
but this is all
right?
across the country. This is a sampling.
No,
okay?
it's not all across the
Springfield,
country.
Missouri. Okay? They said teachers have to rank themselves on an oppression matrix scale. White English-speaking Christian males were taught that they were part of a oppressor class and must atone for their racial discretion. I won't even do the San Francisco one because I'll take your critique. How about Philadelphia? 5th graders were told they had to celebrate black communism and simulate a black power rally to free Angela Davis.
And Charlie, that's why like the misinfo on COVID
But
is
this is
so,
not misinformation.
No, listen, it's so dangerous to a good conversation.
What misinfo did I
because
say?
I don't know if I can believe your bullet points.
Let's keep the conversation moving.
Let's go back to our education conversation and to kind of close it up. I suppose the last question is, should it be banned? Of course it should. But let me ask you just kind of a more general question. CRT should be banned, that is. What should a proper education look like for a child? I guess that's a good way to close, right?
It's a good way to close, right? Because I don't think that we would disagree in this regard. And like to me, like the debate we should be having about American education right now has nothing to do with diversity curriculum. It's about civics, right? So we have a political culture.
I agree.
That is completely anemic, right? And we teach people about the greatness of being an American. All the benefits get through pretty well. The rights afforded to us. But responsibility for democratic maintenance is not a lesson that we impart in any part of our political culture, right? And, to me, our future education really needs to focus on creating a citizen American, and not allowing 50% of the population to sit out the most consequential elections too that are going to determine things for them for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, so, I mean, I find very little I disagree with that. Anything in specific that I would find disagreeable? Because that was kind of general.
I think you would. So
not
like
to
when I would
criticize it,
teach
but-
my classes, and by the way, I had a student for Trump president in one of my classes. It was really
Terrific.
great. Yeah, and we actually got along really well because you never heard about me, did you? So we got
No,
along just fine.
I actually think you're a liberal, not a leftist. I do.
No, I'm
It's a big
definitely not a
difference.
leftist, dude.
That's a big difference.
I
You wouldn't be here if you were a leftist.
I drive a pickup truck.
Do you really?
And watch football. So I'm definitely not a good leftist, right?
I love that.
But in any case, like what I was going to say is, I think at the end of the day, like we really want, and this is why I agreed to do the show with you. I think it's so important for us to start to talk and spend time with other people who we disagree with and have conversations about things like education, right?
Yes.
And the vision that most people have for education is a school that's clean and nice and modernized, right? We don't want to be sending our kids to schools where there's no heat and people have window air conditioners, and we also want our kids to be well-rounded, right? We want them to get what we would small L liberal arts curriculum that involves history, science, math, and I don't know that affording the government permission to decide what and what not affords or it qualifies as proper history. I just think that is
Well, I mean, I think though that if all of a sudden,
dangerous.
to use an example used earlier, if like all of a sudden a group of teachers are like, we're not going to teach the Holocaust anymore, we're going to deny it. I think you would want to intervene, right?
Yeah, I mean, that there's teachers right now who are worried about talking about things like the Holocaust, or like my lecture. I used to do a lecture on civil liberties because I teach an American government textbook, and you get a chapter, civil rights, civil liberties, and I had civil rights and civil liberties, and that lecture is very, focused on Martin Luther King Jr., the movement to end segregation, which of course happens by judicial and federal.
But now we're going to have to
right?
re-end segregation because of what's being taught in the school.
So, like,
you see what I'm saying?
How would you teach Southern segregation?
Truthfully and honestly, how?
Here's
Here's how.
Tell me how. No,
original
I wanna hear
source
how.
documents.
Okay.
Original source documents is the
Right.
only way to teach history.
And when they show that in the South, they designed an institutional structure
want me to tell you?
keep black people from
Yes.
voting, that is naturally going to make white people feel bad, don't you think?
No, because they'll feel good because Dwight D. Eisenhower intervened as a Republican president. They'll feel good about their country that was able to close that chapter. Nothing
Who
racial
doesn't
about
love
it.
Dwight Eisenhower, right?
I mean, some people don't like Dwight Eisenhower. The point is that, like, I'd teach honest history. I would read the oral arguments from Brown versus the board.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
They don't do any of that right now.
Oh,
you understand
no,
that,
agree,
right?
I agree.
I would read
the education that
but like this is
people
part of the
get
problem, though, right?
is very bad.
And like
but it's not bad in substance. It's bad in resource and investment.
Sure,
and
but I'm
everything. 'Cause,
talking more.
I know this for a fact because I taught at a competitive university. It wasn't Harvard, okay, but you couldn't just schmooze in. Both of them, and UGA is actually now, because of the universal free college education for everyone, each class has gotten better and better. It's like 4.0s, right? So I've taught decent students at 2 institutions and 2 institutions in the South, all right? And I will tell you, when they come into me, these kids who are all AP students, they're all like top-notch, high school students, or at least B and above, they know nothing about American history. So,
No, but
like,
so you
we
asked-
are obviously not.
You would ask how I would teach it,
getting on
right?
that.
So this is why I'm a big critic of the 1619 project, because it doesn't use original source documents.
It uses a lot of them,
No,
but
it does
it
not.
does also rely on some other second source. I know
Okay,
that.
thank you for admitting that, because not everyone will.
No,
and
well-
Nicole Hannah-Jones does a lot of kind of mishmashing together, and she's been heavily criticized by her peers. But it's also a matter of, like, you look at history, is it telling you a story? What is that story? You want to tell an honest story, right?
Right.
And what is the type of citizen you want to create? And, you look at the goals of Marcuse and Foucault and Delgado and Ibram X. Kendi and all these, Robin DiAngelo, they are willing to use history as a way to create activists, right? As like, we want to try to make people so angry, so guilty about their past, when it's a lot more complex than that. You know it's complex. It's not, quote unquote, black and white. It isn't.
Yeah, well, it's also impossible to assess history and the actions of people in historical times without acknowledging that you cannot perceive what it would be like to live in that environment, right?
Well, I agree with that.
No.
That's not the way the educational, I'm not saying you're defending it, but a lot of the educational regime right now says, like, we know exactly, Thomas Jefferson's a bad person, Washington's a bad person, like, the founders are racist. That's a consensus view.
See, I have to vehemently disagree that that's quantitatively true. So, like, we could find out, though, right? We could audit every textbook.
Well, like,
because-
if you go to the AP textbook,
Yes.
I want you to do this and come back
I will.
and ask me, do you think that the AP U.S. history textbook, as it's published from Pearson, right? Do you think it gives a fair hearing to Madison, Jay, Hamilton, and John Quincy Adams, Washington? I would say absolutely not. Based on the excerpts I've seen, it's a heavy emphasis on the slave trade, which should, of course, be incorporated, but there was a brilliance to the founders. I mean, they had a civilizational
Oh, absolutely. And
genius.
I get to teach that. I got to teach that anyway until recently. And
so we agree on that.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Like, what we need is more history education. I have just filled in the gaps from I went to college too, right? I mean, a graduate school, and I still knew almost nothing about how World War II came about, I understood the high points of, World War I and World War II, and I understood the Holocaust, but I did not understand in intricate detail the story, the collective story of humanity. And that collective story, Charlie, is one of great promise and amazing achievement, but also a lot of senseless brutality.
So let me ask.
So my argument
I'm in
is
such
when you
agreement with
talk
that.
about Madison, he designed the entire Bill of Rights. He was pushed to do it.
Well, George Mason did, but yes, that's okay. Yeah.
No, Madison wrote the Bill of Rights.
No, he did not. George
yes,
Mason
he did. I'm pretty sure he
George
did.
Mason wrote it in 1776, Virginia
The
Declaration of Rights.
the
But
federal Bill of Rights. I'm talking about the Bill of Rights and the
but
Constitution.
James Madison took it
well,
from George
that's
Mason.
fine.
But that's okay. That's a separate issue.
And I believe that Mason pushed him to
but
do
Madison
that.
was
right?
the father of the U.S. Constitution.
And here's where Madison was really wrong, right? Because
Madison or Mason?
Madison,
Okay.
because when he was pushed about including specific liberty
In
protections for
1791,
individuals, right? When he was pushed about that, he was like, "Oh, we don't need that. The separation of powers achieves this check on tyranny just fine. It secures individual liberty. We don't. All this is just extra, right?" And he could not have been more wrong. When we go through the annals of American political development, It is the Bill of Rights getting applied to the states to protect you as an individual over time, over selective incorporation, which is like 200 and some odd years, that actually has produced for today, the America that you and I are sitting in is the most free America with the most robust speech that it's ever had. Even though we don't think about it like that, this is the truth, right?
Well, I think there's some truth to that. I think as we close, we both want good education. I think we could agree on it more than not. But the closing point I really want to emphasize with you, and I'm not sure I'm going to convince you right now, but I am kind of widespread in the educational space, is that the type of history that you want and that I want generally, which is a fair reading of history, which does give the credit to the founders where it's due, which is this historical brilliance and genius that we do benefit from.
And then criticizes them robustly for being involved in those that were.
Those that were, okay, fine.
Right?
Those that were, because not all of them were.
Yeah,
okay.
exactly. And in fact, here's the thing.
Some were abolitionists, like Quincy Adams.
The entire 3/5 provision of the Constitution, the de jure institutionalization of slavery, protection of slavery in the new American system, those were the products of the need for compromise, right? You had 13 colonies.
Sort of. 3/5 is a lot more complicated than that.
You had to get consensus from rural states, small states,
3/5 was not about consensus.
And the South, where slavery was an institution that they were dead fast if they were going to form a country.
Do you want to go into the 3/5 direction? Because they put it to actually make Southern states weaker. Because Southern states wanted to count every slave as a census, so they had a disproportionate amount of votes, so they could eventually make slavery the law of the land.
Right.
3/5 was actually a way to make slave states weaker and keep the Union together.
Yeah,
it was
so it's compromise.
It was a compromise, but it was actually an anti-slavery compromise.
I mean, it is, yeah. I mean,
but
it's
told as a.
It's what they had to, the deal with the devil
right.
they had to
However,
make to get us this fabulous country that we now have to
However, we
defend
look at the
from
Northwest Ordinance, Article 6 or Article 7 of the Northwest Ordinance, no new slavery in the new territories. So there's a lot there. Most students would walk away with that. Do you have anything on your mind you wanted to make sure you talked about? The floor is yours as we close.
Well, Charlie, I'm so glad to be here to talk. I'm really impressed that you've developed a show that we can come and have this kind of conversation, and I hope other people will come and speak with you.
You can help me find guests.
Yeah, I mean, people were like, "Are you crazy? You're doing that?" I'm like, "Look, I think that you have hit a point in your career. Congratulations, a very successful career, where you have a lot of influence on a lot of young minds. And if I can have an opportunity to come and also join you in that influence for an hour, it's a real pleasure to me.
Thank you.
And finding out that you're a Duck fan.
Well, that's
everything.
Yeah, I think that these discussions are really important. I actually think we agree on more than not. I had this belief you were going to have like this very anti-American view of history, kind of like, because that's just kind of, I deal with that a lot.
Yeah. But you also get a very distorted view of the world, right? Because you're in politics. And I just spoke to this woman on the airplane next to me because she's like, "What do you do?" I'm like, "Well, I never want to tell people what I do, right? Because it's politics. I'm sure you're the same, right?" So I try to be a little vague, but it never works out all the way. And this woman, she doesn't know any of the news that's happened over the last 3 months. I mean, she knows about Ukraine and Putin and maybe, inflation or other things like that. And I think it's so important for us to remember that we are mired in the extremes, right? We are mired in a world that is not typical modal American experience. If you know who Nancy Pelosi is, you are a weirdo. Right? Like if you go stand in a grocery store and yell, "Nancy Pelosi," everyone's gonna be like, "Who the hell are you talking about?" Right? And so I would urge you to consider when you're looking at a leftist or a socialist or whatever, to remember you're probably not looking at a modal Democrat.
I just look at the theorists that are implementing things like Nicole Hannah-Jones and Foucault.
Right.
And Foucault's not alive, but
I mean, it's the same thing I do, right? I mean, I look at like what's happening within, the conservative movement right now, its embrace of, more authoritarian elements. I mean, to me, a CRT, a bill that comes in and tells teachers, "Hey, this is what you can and cannot discuss in a classroom, and we're going to put a monitoring system," is big government,
so
right?
I got to go there. You think we're embracing authoritarianism?
Yes, very much so.
Have you heard of Justin Trudeau?
Yeah, but so here's the thing. Totalitarianism and Justin Trudeau. Come on, really? Defend that.
He just declared martial law, Emergency Wars Act, that was used for invasions against
If
truckers.
those protesters were Black Lives Matter protesters, though, I have no doubt you'd be like, hell yeah,
you know
move
why?
them out, man.
You know why? They burned 30 churches.
So it's what I'm saying
What
to you
crimes
is,
did the truckers commit?
it's really important, and I do this to the left
No, seriously,
all the time.
what crimes?
Like George W. Bush, he was a controversial
I'm not a
president. Okay? But he was a normal president. He followed the basic rules of law. You could argue the surveillance stuff is a little bit extraordinary. It was an extraordinary time. But generally speaking, he was an institutionalist, right? And what we're seeing within the right now is the real primacy of a movement that is not interested in small L liberal government.
I want to focus on this Trudeau thing, though. You realize they shut down bank accounts for people that supported Trump.
Yes, because
How is that
money,
not authoritarianism?
Because in other countries, like our system is so atypical. Like I always had to explain that to students. Okay, here's the American election system. There's basically there's little rules here and there. Oh, after 180 days, an interest group can't mention the party name or whatever, right? But generally speaking, when you compare us to other Western democracies, we have almost no rules. We can say or do almost anything and for as long as you want. So we have really moved into a situation where we're just constantly campaigning.
So Trudeau signs the War Act, seizes crypto wallets and bank accounts because a bunch of truckers were
in Canada,
in his camp.
when you send money from another country to influence domestic politics, that's a crime.
That's not what they were going after. But
yeah,
okay,
no, that's why they got there was only 30% of the sourcing of that donation came from Canada. And I believe that they kept that money. I think they only divested that other portion because it's against the law.
They confiscated Give, Send, Go and all that. But this idea that the right is embracing authoritarianism, while in Australia they say you can't leave your home after 10 p.m.
Yeah, but they almost killed nobody. Like we decided to do let it rip. And you know, whether or not that was the right policy, and half the country, yes we did, Charlie. We opened Georgia, Florida, and Texas.
And Florida had some of the best results of any state.
No, I mean the death. Have you seen the
death rate way lower than New York?
No.
Yes.
No, dude. Especially
for old people.
Especially when you look past the vaccine time period, where we really see red states with disproportionately high COVID mortality rates.
You can't be serious.
I will show you that data. Since you love data,
Florida,
I will show it to you.
Florida has a much better death rate
If I make
than
you
New
a
York.
deal, can you make me a deal, Charlie?
New York versus
because
Florida
the
COVID
professor
death rate.
in me cares. If I can prove to you
Florida
that the
versus New York.
vaccine mattered and cut death rates big time in states that vaccine,
guess what?
will you get the vaccine?
Absolutely not. Only if you could prove one thing. If every single one of the units of measurement was also given early treatments.
All right.
It's
well,
a
Charlie,
pandemic of the untreated, not a pandemic.
Let me ask you this. What's your favorite flower?
I don't really think about that.
Okay, well, I need to know when I have to send it to you in the ICU, buddy.
A rose? Hey, I don't have any plans to go there anytime soon.
I hope not, dude.
And
but it does
thankfully,
kill
I'm armed
randomly, so please get the vaccine.
Never going to happen.
How are we going to do duck games if you're dead?
Well, guess what? I want to walk, so I'm not getting the vaccine.
Yeah, but no, you know what? You're not going to not be able to walk.
So just true story. I asked my whole audience of America Fest, 10,000 people, how many people know someone who died from the vaccine or was paralyzed or crippled? Every hand went up.
Oh, yeah?
This is bigger than you could ever imagine. It's either they're all lying or there's a scandal happening in front of you like you wouldn't believe.
I know my teacher pulled my third grade classroom and they all wanted more recess time. It was a real shock.
Yeah, so basically you're saying they're all liars. That's a good way to end.
I
so,
like
all right,
it.
Anything you want to plug?
I do want to plug Oregon Ducks again. Go Ducks, go Lanny, go get us some 5 stars, buddy. I want a natty.
Thank you for watching this episode of Debate Night. Rachel, thank you for being our guest. And next time on Debate Night, Charlie Kirk will be debating Buck Angel on transgenderism in America. We'll see you next time.
Well, happy Sunday. Welcome to the Breakaway Podcast. You know who I am? I'm John Roots. We got another crazy
good Sunday conversation, this time with my good friend Lily Stanley. She was a pole vaulter at Grand Canyon University. And you know what we stand for here at Breakaway and Turning Point USA? We stand by our values and convictions. Obviously, we live in a world where we're on the opposite end of the spectrum. We don't align with a lot of people, but at very least, we want to have discussions. And we don't want to be canceled by just sticking to our true American values. And she's someone that has to sacrifice a lot. And she was able to find a light at the end of the tunnel. It's very encouraging to me, hearing this story before we even jumped on the podcast. And I hope it's encouraging and empowering to you as well. It's going to be something solid for, other collegiate athletes out there. Maybe you're thinking about jumping into college and you're thinking, I have these conservative values. Should I be silent about them? If I speak up about them, will I lose my career? Will I lose some friends? This is someone you need to listen to, and someone that's going to give you the tools and resources to fight back and stand for something. Upon further ado, Lily Stanley. There's obviously craziness you had to deal with COVID. There's such a hyper-politicized atmosphere that you're involved in on college campuses.
Yeah.
And you had to make a sacrifice. And I think we need to hear more stories like yours, because you're one of, unfortunately, many across the country that have had to deal with these kind of things. Can you give people a little bit more of a breakdown of your time on the track and field team?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we all know that what happened over the past 2 years really hit young people pretty hard, and particularly all athletes in general. So being a collegiate athlete while having to navigate this entire new world ended up costing me my sport, and a lot of people different aspects of their life. Basically what happened with me, I was a Division I pole vaulter here at a local university, Grand Canyon University, and
Something I would never ever do. I tried that one time in high school, and
yeah,
I thought that was the end of my life.
No, it's tough.
It's
Let me
tough.
be clear. It is not an easy sport. I mean, pole vaulters also know and talk very openly about how we have no idea what we're doing. It is totally bizarre. It's very anti-natural. But anyways, I was very close with my coach. I looked at him like a second father. He was always a very rational, and very nice influence in my life. He was great. He was very there for me and the rest of the team. And then a switch flipped when we ended up having to leave campus in March of when the virus hit. And a lot of things, I mean, I know everyone was kind of in freak out panic mode. Nobody knew what to do, how to handle it, what is too safe, what is not safe enough. And
I think that showed our humanity a little bit. Like right when it hit, we didn't know. Like
right.
It's almost what goes through our mind is, I mean, I feel like I've seen shows and movies like this, and I want to make sure like my friends and family are okay. And I just don't really know like how much this is really going to affect me individually, or this is going to affect my family, or what it looks like career-wise. So I think rightfully so, a lot of people were just like, all right, let's just try to figure this out. There's things that are more important than athletics. But I think we found out pretty quick what this turned into.
Yeah, I mean, people always want to err on the side of caution, but I was always of the opinion that you can err on the side of caution until it messes with people's liberties and rights and freedoms. And for some reason, we just kind of gave all of that up in this whirlwind of confusion. And so I had a problem with a lot of the protocol that was being implemented because it didn't make sense. It was hypocritical. Places we could go or couldn't go that weren't synonymous. Like, you know, you can't be within 6 feet of each other, but then you can go hang out in your dorms with each other unmasked, and that kind of.
Or you just go to a college party. Right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can not use the convenient water station right here inside the training room, but you have to go on all the way 3/4 of a mile down the building and use that one.
So you're telling me there's different water stations that you guys use?
Oh, John, that's not even half of it.
This sounds like the 60s almost, where there's like segregation now, where it's like certain people can use this or you can't use that.
Right. So one of my favorite protocol was you had to shower before coming into the training room post-practice protocol. So get this. So you can come into the training room before practice, do your prehab, whatever, go have your practice outside in 115-degree Phoenix, Arizona, and then you had to shower before coming in to get rehab. Because I guess your sweat inside the building is different than the sweat outside the building, and then you come in and you cross-contaminate. But me, not living on campus, I don't have a shower on campus because they also shut down the university locker rooms, right? So, and I'm also, because I don't live there, not allowed to go to other people's dorms. So I was completely exiled from being able to get any sort of rehab after practice, unless I wanted to drive home to my household 30 minutes and back to get my ankle taped. And if you know anything about athletics, like you can't ice a shoulder before jumping, you'll rip it out of its socket. So I kind of played devil's advocate on the big COVID Zoom calls we would do, and I would just ask these questions. So you're telling me if I break my ankle while running, I can't come inside until I've showered to get it taped up? Okay, is somebody going to be next to the pole vault pit to wipe down my pole before giving it to somebody else? You know, like, because...
So were these like Big West rules? Because that's the Big West, right? That's what GCU's a part of? Or the Mountain West?
No, we are in the WAC. West Athletic Conference. So it's funny, I started to reach out to other schools in our conference for comment because I was confused, and I was literally the only athlete asking any sort of questions, and kids were coming up to me like, dude, thank you for asking these questions, et cetera. I'm like, listen, somebody else has got to start talking or I'm going to get very exhausted. And then we get there one day and my pole vault coach decides that the pole vault team, the 12 of us, we're going to be the ones to wear the masks outside running and jumping in 115-degree heat. Nobody else, not the sprinters, not the hurdlers, the pole vaulters had to do it because he said we want to do everything we can to say that we weren't the ones transmitting anything. But by the way, go to a party that weekend and don't let them know and you'll be fine. So that was...
And then when was this exactly? Like how many months was this after the pandemic hit and then you guys were able to go back and practice?
Let's see. This was after we took off in March, and this was about the following February, January. So it had been about a whole year into COVID. And that was really...
I mean, that's after data came out that talked about transmission outdoors.
Correct.
You already saw that, like the Fauci emails and everything talking about cloth masks.
Right. So now I'm starting to get really pissed off because now you're forcing me into doing something now that not even like that nobody else has to do, and we're outside and it's an individual sport. It's not like we're touching batons or anything. We're just running 30 meters outdoors. It's so hot I can hear my heartbeat in my ears and I can't breathe. It just was so absurd. And then one day our athletic trainer comes outside and she's like, hey guys, we're going to switch the testing method from the normal PCR test to the 15-minute test, even though we're not traveling and we don't need 15-minute results. And these guys on our team are freaking out. They're like, hey, we did this test the other day. It's so painful. It hurt really bad. Braden started bleeding out everywhere through his nose. And
so yeah, that's the nasal one where they have just like the long...
Right, the ones that you're actually supposed to go to like down your throat, but they were going up too high because they tape ankles. These aren't nurses, right? So anyways, they said that this was what they were going to do. The kids on my team who'd already done it said we will like do everything in our power to
so
never do that
specifically,
again.
is this GCU Grand Canyon University deciding this, or that's coming down from the conference that say like conference-wide?
No, this was GCU who decided to do this because I started talking to other athletes elsewhere and they were doing spit tests, things that weren't very abrasive, and now we're having to do the long swabs. And so I asked, and my trainer made a joke, like, you don't push back on this or I'll shove it up there harder. That's literally what she said. So I'm mortified because you tape ankles for a living and now you're poking people's brains and now it's funny. And so I talked to my coach and I said, hey, listen, I'm not a team player. I want to be here. I want to practice with you guys. I love this sport, but my body, my choice. I want the original test and not that test. It's unnecessary for me to have 15-minute results when I'm not traveling.
Because it's also like, explain to me why this test is going to be a lot more accurate than this other test. And
through the grapevine, I found out it was a lot cheaper. So now we're abusing the students with this for results that we don't immediately need because it costs less money. So I told my coach, I'm not doing it. You can get me the other test. They dismissed me from the team that day. They said, don't come back here until you're tested. And we figure this out. So now I'm being discriminated against for not wanting to be a team player. I was all in it. I just said that's unnecessary for me and my health and what we're doing here. So that sucked. I left, and 15 emails with the AD later, I was granted the opportunity to have my test. And he said, don't tell anybody, keep it super low key. And I was like, I'm gonna tell everybody. I told everyone, I'm like, listen, you can take control of your body and force them to do what's comfortable for you because you're the student here, etc. So anyway.
Also, what kind of leader is that? Where it's like, okay, no, like we'll do this little exception here. Like, thanks for pushing and being persistent about this. Like, and hopefully a lot of people don't ask about it because I feel like that's what it came down to. Is you had leaders that just cowered.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you had a lot of people that's what's so crazy about this whole time. It just turned into this whole moral conundrum that like, just do this because this is the best for everybody. And I'm sure, especially being at a Christian college, you had a lot of people that are falsely telling you what love is. This is the best way to love one another, right?
Well, that's what my coach turned it into. And that was what was so bizarre because I had such a great relationship and then literally a switch flipped and he turned into a totally different person with this stuff. The language he would use about, we're doing this because we want to be the people that can say we didn't have anything to do with transmission and this is the best way to be a teammate and all of these emotional plays that weren't rooted in any sort of numbers or anything realistic. So long story short, I ultimately ended up getting COVID on their watch, and then they turned me into like a science experiment where I had to give EKGs and blood work every week for the rest of my time there at GCU. Being an athlete with them, if you get COVID, this is how you handle it. Now we need to track your blood and your heart. And I just said, listen, I'm a healthy individual. I recovered just fine, thankfully. I'm not doing that. This is too much for me. So I ultimately ended up having
who presented that though? Like basically, yeah, you are a lab rat at that point.
Lab rat.
Like what?
Blood work every week? Are you? Absolutely not. I was already weary of the first blood work I had to give just to get there. I mean,
and then also, who's going to be performing that? Do you have people that are actually in like the nurse? Is there a nursing school?
There is. Now, that's all fine. I just thought it was so bizarre. I'm also just weird. I don't know where those samples are going. I don't know what they're doing with them. Yeah. I don't know what data they're extracting. I don't know what lab they're going to or what they're going to be used for. It just made me so deeply uncomfortable, the whole thing. And then on top of all of the scientific discrimination I was having, we had just got done with Floydapalooza that summer, and I had a ginormous target on my back for being an overtly conservative individual on my social media. I had my captain posting my NCAA 4-time champion captain tweeting, "If you're friends with Lily Stanley, block me." Crickets from my coaches. Nothing. No help. Told I wasn't allowed to wear my Turning Point merch to practice, but he was allowed to wear a Black Power Olympic shirt on the field. Like just blatant double standards. So it became an extremely toxic environment for me. No support from my team. Everyone ostracized me. I would literally have to run to people on the track to have a face-to-face conversation with them because they had group chats about my stuff. None of them followed me, but yet they were still all commenting on my stuff and seeing it before anybody else did because they tracked it like I was some sort of beast. So
what was there like a triggering point though when it came to, because obviously like social justice was pushed a ton. Was there an aspect of like Lily Stanley didn't post a black square, or you had something specific to say?
Yeah.
Or what happened?
It was definitely my opinions about BLM Inc., the organization, and some of my best friends, kids I had housed throughout the year, people I've slept in the same vicinity with and fed, that now I'm a racist and all this stuff because of my view on the organization as a whole. And unfortunately, my interpersonal relationships with them didn't translate to that's not the case in their head. So I would try to have those conversations with them. And before the season even started, I got a message from a teammate who said, we're sending a representative to go to lunch with you. Find time on your schedule because we want to hear what your views are to see if we can exist on the same track as you this year. I was mortified. I felt so bad because I was so desperately, they didn't realize like we're all literally and emotionally and spiritually, I'm on the same team as you guys. I want what's best for you. I don't think this organization has your best interest in mind. So trying to have those conversations with a group of people that of course live very different life than me. I mean, it was tough. It was hard emotionally.
So did you say yes to that meeting then?
I did. Yeah, I did say yes to that meeting and it went great. And the poor kid was like, dude, I think this is all crazy. But I'm trying to help my brothers out and all this stuff. And I'm like, listen, you can tell them I love them to death. Nothing has changed here. You guys are still welcome in my household. And please encourage them to have a conversation with me. Please. None of them did. My stuff got stolen out of my locker. 3 weeks into my job here, my tires got slashed. All of them blocked me on social media, and my coach had the audacity.
Your tires got slashed.
My tires got slashed in this parking lot. Oh yeah, straight through the tread, a 3-inch slash. Don't know who. I have suspicions. I have nothing confirmed, but kids had made light jokes about it on the track and stuff. Where I'm not going to say that that's what happened, but I can almost say that I know who did it. Yeah.
And obviously too, like this isn't a place where, it seems a little purple right now. I think it's still probably a little bit more conservative than people give it credit for here in Phoenix, Arizona, just Arizona as a whole. And this is a Christian university where you should have people in the tippy top that should be standing up for you, or standing up for at least diversity of thought, or at least leading in some sort of way that says like this kind of stuff, this division can't happen, especially if you consider yourselves childs of God, like, or children of God, where it's like, hey, we got to figure this out. We might not agree on a few things here, but you are a team. And for me, like hearing stories like this that are shocking. And I know I've shared this on different podcasts. I know I've talked about it on the couch at TPUSA Live. Like, I graduated in 2015. I didn't have to deal with the Trump-Clinton election at all. Didn't have to deal with being involved with this whole like social justice nonsense. Like in college, a lot of the stuff was post-college. And obviously there's a lot of people, like I've lost a ton of friends and I've had tough conversations, but I wasn't in this place where everybody is on the same Jesus team. Like you said, everybody seems to be on this faith journey together. Everybody's on this journey to try to win a conference championship. Everybody's trying to get better at their specific event. And you have not only disagreement, but you're being poked and prodded. That's actually poked and prodded.
Literally.
Colin Kaepernick. So if you want to know what that is, that's what happened to Lily here. And tires are being slashed. There's absolutely nothing to do with science.
I had to
here.
get
It's
campus
crazy.
security involved because kids were telling me that they were going to come curb stomp me on my university. Like, it was getting really bad.
These are like comments online? Or?
These were public Twitter posts. People saying, like, talking about how they were going to gang up and find me on campus. And I told my coach, and he just batted an eye. I mean, it was so...
you must have not even felt safe to go to practice or go to school.
No, and I ultimately had to stop. And I don't even attend on campus anymore. I'm all online. And, we were talking a little bit about the show, about the sacrifice that you have to make for maintaining your morals and your ideology. And unfortunately, not only, it costs everybody their friends. We know that. But more than that, it cost my sport. It cost my passion, something I was born to do. And it ultimately really tainted my opinion of universities. You hear about all this stuff. Conservatives are always talking about the crap that happens on university campuses and whatnot. I never thought it would be my Christian university. That's why I went there. That's why I paid tuition there and took that opportunity over other state schools, ASU, U of A, elsewhere, because it's supposed to be a Christian university, and that means something to me, at least. So it was very interesting. Fortunately, I found a home here where I'm able to be valued and utilized to further a more impactful purpose than just a state championship. But it was unfortunate, and I'm sure you understand a little bit about an identity crisis that happens post being a collegiate athlete and working so hard for so long for something, and then you wake up and you don't have a practice to go to. You don't have a training room to be in. You don't have that immediate community. And it's like you have to reinvent yourself almost. You have to find something else to be passionate about. So,
And I think too, there's this aspect of sacrifice that I'm glad you bring up. And I feel like that's been on my heart a little bit more recently because there's times where you just, I wasn't blatantly out here to join Turning Point and be open about my conservatism along with my faith, that I wanted to just like sacrifice friendships. There's a lot of times where like I think I'm pretty much a overly optimistic guy. I've become definitely a lot more pessimistic over the 2 years plus. Is
crazy how that happens.
And it's just happening to everybody. But I've had to sacrifice so many aspects of my career. Like even recently, like I've been connected with some companies that I've done work with for years. And, you just get those emails that are just like, hey, thanks so much. I know we were planning on working with you, but we made a little change here. And there's, and then
so much for the party of inclusion and tolerance, right? Isn't that what's funny?
Yeah.
Like, it's never us ruining those friendships or burning those bridges, whether it's family or friends or jobs. I mean, I can't name a time where I've ended a friendship or unfollowed someone or done something like that over a political worldview. Because it's not in our heart. We're not totalitarian like that. I'm so sorry that it ended up having to cost part of your career like that. It's just bizarre.
But at the same time, too, there's a sense of like sacrifice that we have to know. Like for me, I'm not super shocked about a lot of this, and I knew going into this here, like me joining Turning Point was a lot. It was a lot for me already to, be talking and being very open about my faith when I was working in the San Francisco Bay Area, where it's like, hey, if you talk about your faith, like there is a target. There is a target on my back, and I kind of enjoyed it because I'm like, hold me to a different standard. But now there is a political target now that like it's not that I just disagree with you. It's I want you to lose jobs. I'm not going to be interacting with you anymore because I think just you are so opposite end of the moral spectrum that you're even lucky that I'm talking to you right now.
Right. So the prerequisite for positions becomes your ideology and not your qualifications. We've seen that with like either Delta Airlines or different jobs or whatever. Sports now too. It's what type of person do you espouse on social media before it's your athletic ability, before it's your broadcast resume. Those are the types of the social badge is what they have to find first before even giving you the time of day. And I think that's something that is not going to go away in our society anytime soon. And we know that as Christians that that's what's going to happen, but it seems more so now. It's not even religion that ultimately divides people anymore. What really breaks the camel's back is this political stuff.
Oh, yeah. Because, like, I know for me, I don't want to be remembered as, like, some solid voice in the conservative movement. I want to be known as someone that reflected Christ well, as best as he possibly could. I'm not going to go up to the pearly gates and I'm going to have up there to be like, you know what? A couple of these conservative points here, I really enjoyed that a lot. It's like, no, how'd you reflect Christ? And that's what I want to be remembered as. But like right now, people, like whether you're religious or not, you're being persecuted for your politics.
Yeah.
No doubt. And it's wildly uncomfortable. And I think a lot of it comes down to we need to have more identity conversations with people that you knew that you were taking a stand that could cost you your career. It could cost you some friendships and everything. You knew that. Doesn't mean that it's not difficult. But you talk about this sense of reinventing yourself. Man, I knew that a lot of my identity was in sports for a good while. I was never just like a unbelievable athlete, but I was always just a guy that lettered in 3 different sports in high school. I was always like well known. I was able to go play in college, play at Azusa Pacific University there. And then once I got hurt a couple of times, I think my identity started shifting a little bit because I'm just like, all right, well, I'm just a punter. Like I can't take myself as serious anymore. I got a job to do. And I figured like I'm pretty good at this, but I'm not sure if I'm going to go to the league, but I want to go professional as something else. So I got into broadcasting. And then I really enjoyed that at Azusa Pacific. You know, I was broadcasting, doing play-by-play for different games. I was helping start the on-campus news station. And then I had a really successful career, and I still consider it unbelievably successful now and very blessed. I had to reinvent myself after the pandemic. But I went through a major identity crisis.
Yeah.
And I think that's where more people need to be open about that. I found so much identity in what I was doing in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
Like every single time I went out to San Jose or Campbell, you're like, oh, are you the Sharks guy? And it's like part of those too. It's like I enjoyed meeting new people, but that started getting to my head a little bit. And obviously I always wanted to glorify God through what I did. But I started to realize like, wow, I'm finding a lot of like value in that. And then when it gets ripped away, I feel like, isn't that who I'm meant to be? He's like, I'm supposed to be this person with a platform that like people ask like, why are you smiling all the time? Like, why are you always like so happy? And then I got to have different conversations with people. It's like, because I love Jesus and he provided me this platform. And then now I don't have it. Am I really going to be able to make a difference? And I think that's what people need to know. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. It's not going to happen maybe in a few months or a year. It might take a while, or maybe, you know, that that aspect of your career might be taken away and you might have to jump into something else.
Right.
And that's what's so tough for people now. Like, what hill do I die on? And for you, like you decided like that I'm going all out. Whether anybody joins me or not, I'm going to send it.
Yeah. I mean, that's ultimately what I had to do. And it really caused me to look introspectively to what do you really believe? What do you believe so true that you're going to live out? And what do you believe so true that you're going to live out that you're going to not compromise on? There was like a tier system where, you know, you have to, especially if you're going to go that bold with something. I mean, we know as we have targets on our back, but it really gave me the opportunity to have those conversations with people about it, because now I have to be able to back it up, because my biggest pet peeve is talking to these kids on my team and I'm like, well, why? They got nothing. They don't know what they're talking about. And I'm like, well, I have X, Y, and Z for why this makes sense to me. You? Crickets.
Because I mean, we're going into these conversations to try to understand people and like get to just some basis of like what we're all searching for is truth. And we're searching for some sort of logic, where too many people, they muddy the waters with, this is my personal experience. Like someone that has a bad personal experience with law enforcement, like we are going to empathize with that. Someone that has, you know, a terrible experience, like losing a loved one because of COVID. Like COVID's real. Racism is real.
Right.
Tough interactions and deadly interactions with law enforcement happens. But like if you're going to try to conflate your own personal experience with and painting with a broad brush, like this is what happens everywhere.
Stuff.
It gets into my truth, no doubt. And the big thing we talk about here is like this is ruining sports. It's ruining teammates' relationships. It's ruining athletics programs across the country. And like sports used to be the ultimate unifier, and then now there's so much injected into these athletic programs and allowing leaders like your captain of your team to just run rampant, say whatever the heck she wants, because it sounds like coaches,
no checks,
athletic
no
directors,
balances.
they're terrified because it's like, you know, this is that black girl saying this. Like,
well, and they're
like,
they're valid. They're valid in their truth. This new thing that our society has done is we have put on a pedestal people's individual truths. There's no such thing as objective truths. As Christians, we understand there are night and day, black and white, absolute truths in this life and in this world. The world doesn't see it that way. It ebbs and flows. It can be this way today and that way tomorrow. And I think that's caused some real problems. And that's what's obliterating all these industries. I mean, so far as now we have conflated gendered sports. We don't even have male versus female sports anymore. And now it's just get on a team, do your thing, and if everybody else suffers, at least you're living your truth. At least you're being verified, and everybody else, it costs them everything.
We're going to take a quick break from this incredible conversation to talk about food. Food's a huge part of the sports experience. What if you could buy food you need for that watch party and donate to TPUSA without even leaving your home? Incredible, right? Now you can do good with Good Ranchers and eat good. They sell 100% American meats, and they believe so much in what we're doing right here with Breakaway and Turning Point USA. They're going to donate $50 to TPUSA on your behalf when you purchase some good meat from them. Good Ranchers delivers steakhouse quality beef and chicken and seafood right to your door. And with our code TPUSA, that's TPUSA, you can donate $50 to our mission while eating delicious food. Nothing better than that, right? Head on over to goodranchers.com/TPUSA today. They got ribeyes, New York strips, gourmet burgers, and so much more good stuff. Order now with promo code TPUSA, TPUSA. And $50 will be donated to our mission of sharing and preserving true American values. Go to goodranchers.com/TPUSA to get a box today. Once again, that's promo code TPUSA at goodranchers.com/TPUSA. Do good while you eat good. I'm glad you bring that up, because I know this morning as we talk, I was reading the Sports Illustrated article about Leah Thomas, and I'm going to pull that up right now. There's a few different quotes
that is a wild
I'd love
article
to hit on, but it's one of those things where it's been turned into this Leah Thomas issue instead of we have biological men that are ruining women's sports issue. And so often they try to turn this into, I know there's aspects of this where they tried to say that this is basically just right wingers that are trying to push back here, and that anybody, so this is what it said. So Thomas's story, this is from that Sports Illustrated article. Leah Thomas's story has become a right-wing obsession, a regular topic of discussion on Fox News. So obviously they're going to say, just like you
taint
say,
it.
Yeah, they're going to taint it. They
They're
say
painting the narrative
Fox
right there.
News triggers somebody.
Because I'm sorry, that's also not the case. There's plenty of other, there's been a few feminists that have come out, like plenty of lefties. I mean, ultimately, I think it's a left-wing position. I mean, if you look at the women's rights movement, that was about women and protecting women, and so that's ignorant of them to just paint it as a right-wing problem.
But that's what they're going to say is like, well, we are protecting women. Like Leah Thomas is a woman. That's what they want. That's what they want you to think, and that's how they're going to try to get this across. And then what he goes on to say is conservative opinion sites have called her a man and dead named her. So dead named her, saying her old name, and purposely using that name she went by before transitioning. Her moves have been minutely tracked by UK's Daily Mail, including once. This is what was absolutely insane to me. This specific line here, including once with cruel detail about her habits in the women's locker room provided by an anonymous teammate. Remember when this used to be known as sexual harassment
or assault?
They talk about, like, there's actually teammates here. It's like, male genitalia is in the women's locker room here. Like, identify, like...
Now that doesn't mean anything. Your opinion, your feelings are not valid anymore because we have a bigger social justice elephant in the room.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this a little bit where, the left is so funny because they'll run into these intersections of all these problems and they end up just picking the side of the most vulnerability or the most emotional reaction. So those people's feelings... Now it's not believe all women. Now it's believe the woman with the most crap on her back. So now Leah Thomas gets everything catered towards her, despite what the other girls are saying. Their opinions aren't valid anymore because we have to cater towards the one who's portraying the victimhood at the cost of everybody else. Not only records, spots on teams, all that, but I mean, the emotional damage that this is doing to young girls. I mean, the transgender sports issue is something that I just think is so bizarre and backwards, and there is no logical or scientific explanation for it. I mean, you want to talk about following the science? They've made it an entire emotional issue, and it has nothing to do with emotions, and it goes back to my truth trumps science.
Yep.
It's incredible.
And that's why, like, even you have parents that are stepping up here. Like, a lot of these athletes are terrified to say anything. Like, just it goes along with your story.
I get it.
Where there's not a lot of Lily Stanleys out there. There's probably just a handful of you out there that just feel unbelievably empowered and so convicted to stand up and be willing to lose something, that some of these parents have to step up and say something. I know in this article, some of these parents are quoted saying, "We support Leah as a trans woman and hope she leads a happy and productive life because that's what she deserves." So, like, people always preface it like that. We're not saying that she should just be ostracized from society or put into like some sort of like leper colony. That's what the left wants you to think, is like all these conservatives and right wingers. Like, no, this is about integrity. This is about fairness. This is about morality. This is about science. And they went on to say, so this was one parent said, "What we can't do is stand by while she rewrites records and eliminates biological women from the sport. If we don't speak up here, it's going to happen in college after college, and then women's sports as we know it will no longer exist in the country."
It's so sad. I mean, women fought. Where are the feminists? I mean, the same ladies who fought so hard for women to be able to be equally represented in sports and have a team and be able to compete, because we can't compete alongside men for many reasons. Beautiful reasons, not anything to be resentful of.
Just talk about pole vaulting. Like, you could have the very best pole vaulter.
I'll tell you exactly what it is, because I studied it. The top male pole vaulter, the number one female pole vaulter doesn't come within 1,012th. 1,012th on the record sheet, okay? So women, the feminists fought so hard for women to be represented, and now they're fighting so hard for men to be represented over women. It's bizarre. They have no integrity, and it's an exploitation. I feel so I mean, like, I'm grateful to have gotten out of it, because I swear, I told all my male teammates, go identify as a woman and start taking titles and teams and stuff. Nothing's going to hold you back. You might as well. Maybe if we just infiltrate that industry so much, they'll realize how crazy they are for that. It will just obliterate women's sports in every sport. Every single one. I mean, we've seen the MMA fighters die. I mean, what else has to happen?
Yeah.
What is going to be the tipping point? When every lane is a transgender athlete, why can't we have a league for that? I mean, I want her to have a normal experience like everybody else, but it can't cost the livelihood of the rest of the women.
Because also too, there's no like specific guidelines right now. Like,
How does she not
right
see
now,
that?
like the NCAA is saying like, oh, you know, there's like just certain schools and then certain conferences, and then there's like an overarching committee that sends it somewhere else, and then they don't have a testosterone requirement thing, and then the IOC is still trying to figure out what they're going to do. Honestly, if they're still, I know we talked to Erica Brown and Gabby DeLoof, some professional swimmers, about this.
Yeah.
People that have found a lot of success and been very vocal about what's going on here. They said, like, I don't know if it's a transgender league. I don't know if it's just, they do know it's just like stick to your biology, because obviously it's not fair having somebody that is biologically a man being in women's sports, because think about it, like, why is it not flipped around? Why don't you
show me an example? Show me an example of a woman, a biological woman, becoming a man, competing as a man and winning against biological males. This only hurts women. That 9 times out of 10. I'm sure there's some exceptions out there for some freak, naturally born female athletes who transition and end up being able to smoke the boys. But 9 times out of 10, this is only going to backfire on biological women. They are the exploited group every single time.
Yeah, and that's why I feel like, just pun intended, this is a turning point in sports. And we really got to figure out what we're made of here. And either you're going to be too scared to say something that could potentially make you lose a couple followers or something, or you're going to stand up for women's sports that should be supported. Because I don't watch the WNBA, but I think it definitely is getting a little bit more popular. It's getting a little bit more respect, because even Becky Hamilton is going, and I think she's coaching the Las Vegas Aces now. She's a fantastic coach. She was under Greg Popovich with the San Antonio Spurs. You have some fantastic athletes like Diana Taurasi, and then you also got athletes in track and everything that, they should be supported. And then we have a great women's soccer team, but there's been a lot of wokeness. Like, people don't even want to support you anymore.
Like if your viewership wasn't low enough, you're not getting any sort of viewership now. Yeah. People don't want to talk about politics. They just want to watch sports. Sports used to be the one thing that could bring everybody together. Differences aside, it's an objective way to value people. And that's what's really cool about sports, is for the longest time,
meritocracy.
it is the only time that objective truth will win. Can you hit the ball farther? Can you run faster? Can you shoot it more accurately? Those are objective truths. And now, even in the Sports Illustrated article, it was talking about how, she just keeps saying, like, I'm just here to swim. I'm just here to swim. I don't know. I think we've just absolutely lost our minds when it comes to this stuff. It's unfortunate, the situation and the emotional turmoil that these people are in, and I have compassion for that, but it can't cost biological women their place. And you'd think they would get that, but I guess not.
And that's why I'm excited. Actually going to be going out to the NCAA championships for women's swimming and diving out in Atlanta. We're going to get a little crew together, and definitely want to hear from some people going to that event.
That's awesome.
I'm sure there's going to be some people that might say, just like, blur my face out or something. There's going to be plenty of people there that are there to support their daughter, their sister, their friend, or just support women's athletics in general. And I know they don't agree with it.
No, I think a lot of people, unfortunately, it makes them deeply uncomfortable to be that far out of the box. People want security and safety so bad that they'll do things that they don't ultimately agree with in order to maintain that comfort. And I think that's a big flaw of our human existence. Even the Israelites wanted to go back into slavery because at least they had meat, right? Human nature is not to be gung-ho about truth. It's to just do what's comfortable. And this is the result. This is what happens when good men do nothing or good women do nothing. You just obliterate things.
Explain that then, because I think there's too many people that try to make this just a women's issue.
Mhm.
And I think it's similar to abortion talk too,
Mhm.
where it's just like, don't have a uterus, shut your mouth. And it's like, well, I mean, stepping up for the unborn.
There's so many
and I mean, obviously we don't need to get into like the whole abortion situation, but I think trying to just say there's only one, I mean, there's two genders, so people need to start explaining that a little bit more too, where it's like, oh no, they can be whoever they want, or there's so many different.
But I mean, the left is just full of fundamental flaws. I mean, even the no uterus, no problem. It's like, didn't you guys just say that you didn't even have to have a uterus to be a woman? Now you can just be a woman. So which is it? It's these constant hypocrisies within the left, and that's the goalpost. I mean, when you have no absolute truth, when you have no black and white moral compass, it's just whatever you want that morning.
So
Doesn't
what would you tell men that are out there that are just terrified to say something? Because for me, I feel like I'm going to continue to talk about this because I love what Iowa just did. They just signed a bill into law that said anybody that is a biological man, you are not going to be able to compete in women's sports. And it's an incredible photo to see all those young girls. It seems like probably from like teenager on up, and say, like, we want to protect women's sports and we want people to join us in this fight, and we need men to join us too.
What I would tell men is, unfortunately, the stakes are low right now. The stakes are low. You might be societally ostracized, but your daughter is not going to be able to compete in sports if you don't start talking.
Mm-hmm.
It will not be, this is not a sustainable trend at all. The fact that we've got it this far is remarkable because it only is going to get worse unless more states or more universities or more leagues start saying that's simply not going to happen here. It will take over and obliterate women's sports. So same thing with being overtly political or being a conservative in your job and whatnot. I genuinely think the stakes are low right now. We as Gen Z or millennials haven't really been that challenged. We haven't experienced war like our grandparents have or whatever. So when your life isn't on the line, I don't want to hear about the consequences that are going to come with you standing up for truth. Right now, it's just your brothers in the locker room. And that's got to not mean so much to you because you need to find some sort of real absolute value and truth that you believe in and start talking about it because otherwise you're going to fall for everything. And again, I would just encourage everyone, if it causes conflict or confusion, it's probably not the right opinion. 10 times out of 10, if it doesn't feel right or make sense scientifically or emotionally, it's probably not right. So men have to get into this space. And unfortunately, the feminist movement has removed or invalidated all of their opinions, but it's not the case. It needs to happen.
A couple things as we wrap up. I think people need to know they're going to war every single day, whether they believe it or not. And obviously as Christians, it's like, that's why you put on the full armor of God. Yeah. And you're fighting for things that are just way crazier than, CRT, social justice nonsense, environmental justice, or, whatever it may be, pronouns, transgender rights or something like that. People need to know you're going to battle every single day. But that doesn't mean that you should be out there just trying to absolutely just, from either side of the aisle, you shouldn't just be out there just to try to just decimate somebody. Just try to absolutely just kill them and their ideals. Try to bridge some of these gaps. But you are going to war. And I think people need to know that there is sacrifice and there is hurt and there is pain in war, and there's a war every single day. And I think people need to understand that they're in that fight. Last question I'd have for you is, you were talking about some teammates before that were angry with you about what you had to say about BLM Inc.
Yeah.
They were angry about what you had to say about COVID and just standing up for bodily autonomy and basically just getting down to the truth. It's similar to what Joe Rogan said. A couple things that were conspiracy theories just about a couple years ago are now truth. People got deplatformed for that. People lost their career in college athletics. And now what you were saying is, we knew it was truth before, but now for the masses, it's like, here you go. You even have people on your side of the aisle that are saying what I was saying 2 years ago.
That should be encouraging to people.
Have you had conversations with them at all, or what's been happening since that's come out?
John, that I do. I try to, but it doesn't go over well because that requires a deep amount of humility and self-reflection that a lot of the people on that side of the aisle are not capable of, because otherwise they probably would have at least heard what we had to say in the first place. Aristotle says that we are the speaking beings. There's only two ways to govern people. It's either through speech and persuasion or by force. If you're not able to have conversations with people, you're just dictating what they believe. We have to get back to having those conversations. I love to. I think it's great. I've never unfollowed or unfriended somebody because of their views. I actually like to submerge myself in that so that I can understand what they're trying to even say, because it's so confusing to begin with. And yeah, I've tried, and there's been a few people who have thanked me and said, you know what, I kind of, truth spreads like a wildfire, and believe it or not, it will resonate with them someday, whether or not they choose to acknowledge it. Human existence, the cognitive dissonance is to not accept that you've been wrong. And conservatives as well need to do a better job of just admitting, like, hey, listen, you were right. I was wrong. I was ignorant. I didn't know that. And if the left would just do that even occasionally, I think we'd form a lot better of a bridge. And it's unfortunate. I think that's what everyone needs to just focus on. Like, you want to talk about being a better you this year, talk about just admitting when you're wrong. I mean, like you said, these things that have come out to be true, and it's just swept under the rug and no one acknowledges it. And it's like, oops, we missed that next big crisis. When it's like, we should look at that, and maybe you should stop ostracizing us from society and understand that we might have something valuable to say, and at least listen to us. So I'm thankful to have a conversation with you like this, and I wish more people would do it.
Yeah, and I think people just need to reflect on both sides of the aisle too. There's obviously people that have acted like they're on some sort of moral high ground, that have ostracized you, tried to plague you as somebody that just isn't a real Christian, someone that doesn't really care about or love people. But you stood and had courage in your conviction. And I think more people need to hear stories like this. And hopefully it's encouraging and empowering for a lot of people, because I mean, if you don't stand for anything right now, you're probably not going to stand for anything at all later.
That's what I'm saying. Stakes are low right now. You better get used to it, because when they start coming and marking doors and all that kind of stuff that's going to happen, how are you going to be able to make those hard decisions then? You're not going to. You didn't train yourself to do that. That's why you can't ever compromise on values or beliefs. You have to find them, soak yourself in them so you know what they are, and don't waver for them. And I promise you, they're not going to fall on deaf ears. People need it now more than ever. And it is our moral obligation to do so.
And ultimately, this is going to help relationships, and this is going to help sports. This is why we have conversations like this. This is why we have Breakaway, because, I mean, a lot of times, too, people just don't even have an outlet to talk about these things. I mean, I know you've tried to figure out, how do I share my story? How do I maybe do this on my own, put my other pieces of content together? Like here, I mean, we've had so many incredible people on the show, and there's stories that need to be heard. And there's plenty of people, I'm sure, that are going to watch or listen to this and are like, you know what? I feel like I kind of have a Lily Stanley story. And I can appreciate that. And
there's so many more of us than people think. That was one thing real quick that was super interesting, is these universities trying to make you feel like you're the only one. You're the only kid that's like this. You're the only unvaxxed. You're the only whatever, the only one pushing back. It's not true. You know it to be not true. And the more conversations we have with people, we realize that's not the case.
Amen to that. Well, this has been an awesome conversation. Appreciate you very much. Where can people follow you?
On Instagram at Lily Stanley USA, and on Twitter at Lily Stanley.
America.
Or
I love that.
at my desk in the media department.
Well, it's great. It's honestly been a pleasure, like hearing your story more and getting to know you and your heart behind, loving sports, loving people, and loving this country. It's definitely been a huge inspiration to me, so I appreciate you taking some time to share this story. Everybody, we appreciate you very much. If you're not following us on Instagram already, at TPUSA Breakaway, leave us a review, subscribe, 5-star review, please. Don't be like a couple of those trolls that we've seen with those 1 stars. We want 5 stars, but we want to make sure that we're keeping these conversations going. We are on Apple and Spotify. We're on YouTube and Rumble. Appreciate you guys very much. Also, too, quick note, we are taking a week off. We're taking a nice little spring break. All right, nice little time off. So you're not going to get a show on Wednesday, but we will be back refreshed and renewed for the next week. It's going to be amazing. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm John Root. That's Lily Stanley. Peace.
Girl talk time! Sorry, boys. This politics episode ain't for you. You have been warned. But send it to all the women in your life. It could be life-changing for them. Girl talk. Look, when I was 15, I was prescribed hormonal birth control. Not because I was having sex, but because my period cramps were so bad, they made me sick. And almost all of my friends were on the pill and continued to stay on it for over a decade. Some had it prescribed for acne, mood swings, irregular periods, or endometriosis. Others don't even know why they were prescribed at all. They just were.
Why? Why? I don't know why. I don't know.
So how dangerous is the birth control pill? Is it really a one-size-fits-all answer to a myriad of problems from PCOS to acne? Does it affect fertility? Is it harmless? These are all questions that I started asking myself a few years ago, which led me on my own journey of getting off birth control completely.
Doesn't anyone notice this? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills!
I'm obviously not a doctor. Shocker! So remember, this is what I've discovered. And these are just some things I think you should know. You should always consult a medical professional before going on or off birth control. But I'm Alex Clark, and this is a very special deep dive episode of Politics. In my life, I've been prescribed multiple versions of birth control and even tried NuvaRing. Why? I couldn't tell you. When I was a teenager, my period cramps were pretty bad, but that's about it. I told my pediatrician at the time, and her answer was, well, why don't we try birth control? And for over 15 years, I never thought twice about it. After all, if a doctor said I should be on a certain medication, they probably know best, right?
I don't know about that.
As I got older and moved around for work, I went through several new gynecologists and doctors, and not one of them ever asked me why I was on birth control or questioned if I should be on it in the first place. One day, it just clicked in my mind that, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't be on this. After all, I wasn't having sex. Plus, it had been so long since I'd been off it that maybe I'd finally be able to handle cramps. My intuition told me that taking hormones for no reason couldn't be very good. So I threw it away, just like that, cold turkey. And I guess I wasn't the only one.
Why are you gonna throw that all away?
Over 65% of women in the US are on birth control, but the amount of women using hormonal birth control pills is going down. Actually, according to the CDC, only 12.6% of women using contraception took the pill from 2015 to 2017. That is a pretty big decrease if you compare that to 18.9% of women using it back in 2002. It'd be dishonest not to point out that part of that number can be accounted for because those women changed from the birth control pill to an IUD, implant, or patch. But there is no denying the growing movement of women who are ditching hormonal contraceptive options altogether and going for more natural options that are sans hormones instead.
I think we can just be our natural selves. Great, yeah, you know how to.
Women around the world are also realizing that the birth control pill doesn't heal any reproductive problems, which could be attributed to anything from environmental exposures to your diet. The pill just suppresses the symptoms. For years, you may think that your endometriosis or polycystic ovary syndrome has gotten better, when in reality, the actual problem was never addressed, and your hormonal birth control is just masking it so you don't have to deal with it until you do. Years down the road, these women decide that they're ready to have a baby. Unfortunately, those fertility or reproductive problems are still there. Many women then find themselves in a race against time, trying to fix their health problems before their biological clock runs out.
Hey everybody, I got some bad news. Doctor just called. I can't get pregnant. I don't have an uterus.
The truth is, the medical field has an agenda. Look at how it's weaponized a pandemic to infringe on our bodily rights. Why would the birth control agenda be any different? The pharmaceutical industry is a business that makes bank off your body. Hormonal birth control is no exception.
I have to take a pill every 6 hours or I feel funny.
In 2016, I don't know if you remember this, but hashtag #MyPillStory started trending on social media, and thousands of women on both sides of the political aisle shared the side effects that they'd personally experienced due to birth control that no one ever talks about. Some of the testimonies were, after getting precancerous cells on my cervix repeatedly on the pill, I went off hormonal birth control. Didn't happen again. Best bit of my pill story? Getting pregnant because no one told me it was incompatible with antidepressants I was on to combat side effects. Depressed, lethargic, disassociated, sleeping for over 12 hours a day and still exhausted, reluctant to ever try it again. Took the pill when I was 18. Cried every day for a year. High anxiety, no libido, no idea what was going on until I stopped. These women are right on the money. When women are put on the pill, we're almost never told the truth that birth control is a class 1 carcinogen, and many of the side effects include weight gain, blood clots, nausea, cervical cancer, vomiting, headaches, low sex drive, deplete our bodies of important vitamins and minerals, increase depression to the point of suicide, and more.
How bad is it?
I'd take the pills. According to medical journals and psychology reports published as recently as 2019, women using oral contraceptives may exhibit personality changes such as altered emotional memory, recognition of anger, and risky decision-making compared to naturally cycling controls.
Her mood swings are getting wilder. She's becoming a slave to her emotions, just like all women. Particularly you, Leela.
We're always marketing the so-called benefits and best-case scenarios of birth control, but never, ever the risks. And even if we are told about them, they're almost always downplayed.
But shh, don't tell nobody.
You know what else we aren't told enough about? And this is what really gets to me. Hormonal birth control is an abortifacient, aka any drug that induces an abortion. A contraceptive that isn't hormonal birth control pretty much just prevents the sperm from meeting an egg, and you might think that your birth control pill is just keeping you from ovulating so you won't get pregnant in the same way a condom or a diaphragm would work, but hormonal birth control isn't so simple. In fact, experts sum its functions up into 3 parts. 1, keeping a woman from ovulating. 2, keeping sperm from reaching the egg. 3, and this is so important, it makes the lining of a woman's uterus hostile. Meaning, if its first 2 jobs fail, meaning if a woman gets pregnant, the body will ultimately disrupt the implantation of a baby. Makes you really think about what exactly we've all been encouraged to put in our bodies, and sometimes from a young age.
Chemical X.
It takes time for our bodies, sometimes years, to fully get rid of the toxic waste birth control leaves in our systems. It's such a huge part of a woman's early years, and yet it even has the power to affect her attraction and sex drive. One study out of the University of Stirling found that those not taking the pill when they met their partners generally found their other halves sexier. Do you hear that? This can change the mans you're attracted to. He has got a great butt. So not only do you have to think of the possible side effects when taking the pill, but you have to also be mindful of how it influences your attraction if marriage is something you want while you're still on the pill. And then, as if that isn't enough, what about if and when you want to have a baby? I mean, these are the questions I feel your doctor should be asking you if they haven't already.
Buddy, don't eat those.
Oh. It doesn't take an expert to know that we should start preparing our bodies for a baby years in advance, not weeks or days. When you get off the pill, at first your period may be irregular, but you have to trust that your body is rebalancing your hormones. Your ovaries and your brain are relearning how to communicate.
F you, hormones! You are a crazy
It may take up to a year to get back to normal, and according to the Mayo Clinic, approximately 10 years after stopping birth control pills, cervical cancer risk returns to the same level as for women who have never taken birth control pills. Charting your cycles with the Flow app or the fertility awareness method can help, and it's very easy, I promise. If I can do it, you can do it. If you follow natural family planning instructions carefully, this method can be up to 99% effective.
I'll take a whack at it.
It is healthy for women to have a true period. Without a period, you don't ovulate. And without ovulation, you can't get pregnant. So it's safe to say that if you can't get your period back after going off birth control, you'll probably have issues with fertility. Even if you do get it back, but it's super irregular, that will make conceiving that much more difficult. Why is this? Every month, our period serves as a way for female bodies to tell us if our hormones are balanced or if something isn't quite right. And a lot of women don't know this, but the period you have on the pill isn't a real period. If you've been on the pill for years and years, you may not have had a real period for decades. Doesn't that sound unhealthy? The period you get on the pill is synthetic. So, if there is something seriously wrong that could contribute to fertility issues later, you have absolutely no way of knowing, and it can take a long time for your regular healthy fertility to return so you can have a baby. Doctors will usually try to assure you that your cycle should get back to normal in a month or 2, but if you ask women who were on the pill for years and years and then stopped taking it when they decided to try to conceive, you'll find out that doesn't seem to typically be the case.
You're having my baby.
So what is the fertility awareness method or natural family planning? It's a totally natural way to help figure out when your fertile window is and when in your cycle you're likely to get pregnant or when you want to avoid pregnancy. It's a way that as women, we can be completely in control of our bodies without the influence of toxic chemicals by paying attention to our menstrual cycle, discharge, and body temperature. Hey, I warned you this episode was girls only. If you do all of those things together, you will have a crystal clear picture of when you're most likely to be fertile, so that way you can try to get pregnant or try not to. It's important to know these facts, though, about the natural family planning method. It does not protect against STIs or HIV. During the time of your cycle when you're most likely to get pregnant, which you will know based on your tracking app like Flow, you'll need to avoid sex entirely, use the pull-out method, or use condoms. It also may take you a few months of tracking your cycles before you become confident in figuring out your fertile time. But once you do, it can be so worth it.
Your period starts in 3, 2, 1.
Doing a deep dive into the harm that can be caused to the female body from birth control was one of the most important things that I learned in my 20s. And my 20s aren't even over. Hormones are healthy. You shouldn't have a baby if you don't want to, but there are better ways than birth control to have one at a time that's right for you. Putting fake and toxic chemicals into our bodies that destroy our natural rhythm and fertility is not the answer.
Are you ready to fight for what's right?
Yeah! Oh my gosh, so I know that was a lot. This is a totally different episode than we normally do, but please heart this episode. I am dying to know in the comments what your birth control journey has been. Are you on it? Are you off of it? Are you sticking with it? Are you ditching it after seeing this episode? Share this to your stories and DM it to every woman in your life that you know is on birth control, and make sure you hit that save button. Of course, you can watch us here every weekday at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific, and you can now catch us on TPUSA Live at the same time. It's pop culture without the propaganda every single day. I'm Alex Clark, and this is Poplitics. Support Poplitics, the first ever conservative pop culture daily show, by subscribing to our channel, turning on notifications, and of course, hitting the thumbs up. Also, our main home is on Instagram. Seriously, just trust me, that's where the real magic happens. Follow us there at Poplitics.